Tonight, under the hush of distant desert winds, we step quietly into the shadowed corridors of a world carved by sand, sunlight, and gods who demanded much from the people who served them. Tonight's story begins with a simple question: why wouldn't you last a single day in ancient Egypt? And slowly unravels an answer woven from heat, dust, mystery, and the quiet endurance of those who lived thousands of years before us. Before we begin, if you're watching from the US, Europe, Canada, or anywhere else in the world, maybe late at night, early in the morning, or somewhere in between, I invite you to like, subscribe, and leave a comment telling me what time you're listening. It helps this channel grow and lets me know where you're joining this journey from. Take a moment now, adjust your pillows, settle into your blanket, breathe deeply, and let your body soften. When you're ready, return with me to the sands, where the sun rises like a burning crown over a civilization both breathtaking and unforgiving. The first light of dawn slips over the horizon, spilling gold across the desert like a slow, steady tide. In ancient Egypt, the sun is not merely a source of warmth, it is a god, and its arrival each morning feels like an inspection. The air is cool now, whispering round your ankles, but every grain of sand already hints at the heat it will soon hold. You stand in a small settlement not far from the riverbanks, where mud brick homes cast long, sleepy shadows across the narrow pathways. The scent of damp earth lingers. The Nile has recently flooded, leaving behind rich black soil that promises life. Farmers are already awake, moving with calm, practiced motions as they check the day's first tasks. Their linen garments flutter softly as they walk, catching the faint breeze before the heat claims it for its own. A woman carrying a woven basket passes by you. She offers a tired but polite nod, her face lined not with age but with years of labor beneath relentless sun. She is no older than those you might pass on the street today, but Egypt's days shape its people quickly. Even now, before the temperature climbs, you feel the intensity of this world pressing gently against your skin. Nearby, a potter kneels beside a kiln, coaxing morning flames to life with slow breaths. The faint crackle of fire mixes with the rhythmic braying of donkeys and the distant splash of oars as fishermen prepare their boats. Everything here has a purpose, a ritual, a cycle. Life begins early, and rest waits until the sun decides to release its hold. But on you to this place feel, each sensation sharpened. The ground beneath your feet is firm yet shifting, textured with centuries of sun-baked layers. The air tastes faintly of river reeds and clay. Even the early quiet seems alive, filled with murmured prayers, whispered superstitions, and the steady pulse of a civilization built on the edge of miracles and disaster. As the sun climbs higher, warming the crown of your head, you realize that simply standing here before any tasks, before any labor order feels like work. In this world, every day is both a blessing and a trial, and your first day has only just begun. The sun climbs with deliberate grace, and soon the cool tenderness of dawn slips away like a shy visitor. Heat begins to settle on your shoulders, gentle at first, but promising a heavy embrace before long. To survive even a single day here, you must stay close to the one source of balance that ancient Egypt depends on: the Nile. You walk toward the river's edge, following a narrow path worn smooth by generations of bare feet. Along the way, reeds whisper against one another, their green blades trembling like strings of a quiet instrument played by the wind. The scent of water grows stronger, fresh, earthy, tinged with the faint sweetness of growing things. The Nile itself spreads out before you like a ribbon of deep blue silk, shimmering under the early light. This river is the heartbeat of the land giver of crops, drink, transport, and hope. People treat it with reverence, almost as though it were alive. Fishermen kneel at the banks, murmuring small prayers before stepping into their boats. Their oars dip into the water with soft, rhythmic splashes, creating ripples that glide outward like gentle breaths. On the shore, farmers inspect the fields freshly touched by the inundation. The black, fertile soil clings to their feet as they test its readiness, feeling its texture, assessing its moisture. Their movements are unhurried, every action rooted in tradition and patience. You crouch near the water, feeling its coolness against your fingers. In this moment, it feels like relief, a soft counter to the growing heat. But the people here do not linger for comfort. Life beside the Nile is both gift and responsibility. The land must be tilled, the canals must be cleared, the crops must be prepared for planting. As you rise, you watch a young boy guiding a pair of oxen along a simple wooden plow. His expression is focused, determined, though he cannot be more than 12 or 13. Even he, still a child by today's standards, works with the calm endurance of someone who understands that the Nile's generosity must always be repaid with effort. Standing here, you realize that this civilization flourishes not because life is easy, but because its people rise each day with unwavering purpose. They know the rhythm of the river, the mood of the soil, the demands of the seasons, and anew, untested can already feel how much this world expects from anyone who dares to live in it. But still, the river moves gently beside you, its soft currents offering a quiet invitation to breathe, to observe, to learn. For now, the day continues in peace, even as its challenges wait patiently on the horizon. The sun now hangs a little higher, spilling pale gold across the land, and with it comes the steady hum of daily labor. Morning in ancient Egypt is not a gentle easing into the day, it is a gathering of duties, each woven into the next, like threads in a tightly bound tapestry. You find yourself walking through the settlement as more people emerge from their homes, doors of woven reeds creaking softly as they open. The streets remain narrow and shaded, offering brief pockets of coolness that cling to the walls like reluctant shadows. From within the homes drifts the warm, comforting aroma of baking bread, flat loaves cooking on heated stones, their surfaces rising and browning slowly. A group of women kneel beside large clay jars, grinding grain with rhythmic, patient movements. The stones they use are worn smooth after years of use, their surfaces shaped perfectly to the task. You can hear the soft scrape of stone against grain, a steady, soothing sound, almost like a heartbeat. This flour will feed families, laborers, and even those working on temples or tombs. Flour making is difficult, repetitive work, yet the women remain calm, their voices drifting in gentle conversation as sunlight filters through the doorway. Nearby, a craftsman sits cross-legged before a small wooden bench, carving a piece of limestone. Chips scatter around him like pale petals as his hands move with practiced certainty. He pauses every now and then, squinting thoughtfully, brushing dust from the piece before continuing. His focus is quiet, unwavering art, his devotion here, a patient offering to both craft and gods. Children run past you, their bare feet kicking up little puffs of sand. Their laughter rings through the air, bright and light, a reminder that even in a place defined by labor and heat, joy finds a way to bloom. They dart between workers, carrying small jars of water, helping in the ways they can. Responsibility grows early here, but it grows gently, shaped by necessity and the example of the adults around them. A man tending to a pair of goats gives them water, stroking their coarse fur as they nuzzle into his hands. Animals here are precious companions to survival, not merely resources, but living partners in daily life. Their bleats mix with the low hum of the settlement, creating a soundscape both lively and comforting. As you stand among these people, you feel the subtle weight of morning settling across your shoulders. Not a heavy burden, but a steady awareness that everything here must be earned through care and effort. The rhythm of Egypt isn't rushed, it's deliberate, patient, shaped by the land and the river. But even this gentle pace demands endurance. Still, there is beauty in it. The sun-warmed earth, the scent of bread, the soft murmur of work beginning. And for now, the day unfolds like a slow sunlit scroll, each moment another line in a story older than memory. As the morning matures, the sun sheds its softness and begins to reveal its true authority. The gentle warmth you felt earlier deepens into something more commanding, a slow, steady pressure that wraps itself around your arms, your neck, your back. In ancient Egypt, the sun is not merely above you. It becomes a presence you must negotiate with, a companion that grows heavier as the day unfolds. The settlement brightens under its glare. Mud brick walls glow a warm ochre, and the sand underfoot glitters like scattered fragments of glass. The air itself wavers slightly in the distance, shimmering with the first signs of midday heat. People here are accustomed to this. They dress in light linens, keep their movements measured, and drink water whenever possible. But for you, unaccustomed to such relentless radiance, even breathing feels warmer, like the air has been steeped in sunlight. Along the path, a farmer leads you closer to the fields. He carries a simple clay jug of water, stopping every now and then to pour a small amount across his face and shoulders. The droplets evaporate almost instantly, vanishing into the thirsty air. He nods toward the horizon, where teams of workers move slowly across the dark silt of the newly flooded land. Their bodies sway with an almost hypnotic rhythm, bending, lifting, guiding oxen, shaping irrigation trenches. The scent here is rich and earthy, the fragrance of wet soil drying beneath the rising heat. It clings to your senses, grounding you even as the sunlight threatens to overwhelm. Dragonflies dart above the waterlogged patches, their wings flashing like tiny mirrors. Palm trees sway faintly along the riverbank, their fronds casting delicate shadows that tremble on the ground like lace. A woman carrying a basket of reeds pauses to greet you. She notices the way you squint against the brightness, the slight hesitation in your steps. With a gentle, understanding smile, she offers a corner of her shawl to drape over your head. It provides a small patch of shade, a soft shield between you and the rising blaze. Here, people know the sun's temperament, well, they respect it, but they also learn to work around it. You continue walking, listening to the distant clatter of wooden wheels as a cart rolls by, pulled by a sturdy donkey. The driver clicks his tongue softly, guiding the animal with patience. The wheels carve shallow lines into the sand, marking the passing of another task completed, another moment shaped by persistence. Yet even in this growing heat, the world remains beautiful, vibrant, alive, ancient. The glow of the day turns every surface into something sculpted and luminous. The river sparkles, the fields breathe with promise, the people move with careful grace. But you can feel it now, the challenge of simply existing in this environment. Your skin warms, your breath slows. Each step becomes a little heavier than the last, and still, the day is young. In ancient Egypt, survival is not dramatic or sudden. It is a quiet endurance, a slow and constant conversation with the land, the sun, and the demands of life. Already, you sense just how much strength this world requires. By the time the sun begins its steady climb toward the height of the sky, the village is fully awake, live with the hum of life, work, voices, and the echo of small tasks performed with quiet devotion. What was once a gentle stirring at dawn has now become a soft but constant rhythm, each person contributing their thread to the tapestry of the day. You walk along a wider path now, one smoothed by countless steps through countless years. The ground feels warm beneath your feet, not yet hot enough to sting, but carrying the promise of the afternoon's intensity. Homes made of mud brick rise around you in soft, sun-baked shapes, rounded corners, flat roofs, doorways shaded with hanging mats woven from reeds. They're simple, but sturdy, built from the very earth the Nile renews each year. A group of men gathers near a small open courtyard. They sit around a low wooden table repairing tools, resharpening blades, retying bindings, smoothing wooden handles worn smooth by seasons of harvest and construction. Their hands move with quiet confidence, each gesture learned from fathers, uncles, neighbors. Laughter punctuates their conversation occasionally, though their voices remain low and unhurried. Life here is steady, not frantic, not desperate, just endlessly busy in a way that feels both grounding and demanding. Nearby, a young girl pours water from a clay jug into shallow basins for pigeons and chickens. She hums a tune as she works, a soft melody carried easily by the warm air. The birds flutter and cluck around her feet, grateful for the small oasis she creates. The scent of straw and grain mixes with the earthy aroma of damp clay, forming a fragrance that feels oddly comforting, warm and familiar, even to you. From a shaded workshop, the rhythmic tap-tap of a woodworker's mallet rings out. He is shaping a small wooden chest, perhaps for storing cosmetics, jewelry, or tools. Decorated pieces are treasured here, even among the simplest families. Beauty is a form of devotion and offering to life itself. His tools are simple, but his skill transforms the plain wood into something graceful and carefully crafted. A baker steps outside to check on bread cooling in woven baskets. The air around him is warm and fragrant, filled with the scent of yeast and grain. He wipes his brow with the back of his arm, glancing at the sky to measure the day's pace. The bread will be sold or traded soon, carried through the village in baskets balanced on skilled hands. Even the sounds of the village feel gentle. Soft chatter, animals calling, tools tapping, the whisper of wind against reed fences. It's not a loud world, but a layered one, each noise part of a larger harmony. And as you take it all in, a realization settles over you slowly, like shade drifting across sand. This place, for all its beauty, never stops moving. Even the quietest moments are filled with tasks, expectations, responsibilities. Everyone contributes. Everyone carries a share of the day. For someone not raised here, someone unused to this seamless blend of labor and calm, the pace might feel overwhelming. The heat, the constant motion, the necessity of knowing one's role. It presses gently but steadily on the mind, the body, the spirit. Yet the village continues, unbothered, steady and sure. Here, life does not rush, but it never pauses. As the sun rises higher and the village settles into the steady rhythm of its morning work, you follow a gently winding path toward a livelier place, one that pulses like a second heart within the community. The marketplace is where stories gather, where goods travel farther than most people ever will, and where the day's energy hums beneath a canopy of sun, shade, and soft conversation. The path leads you between tall clusters of date palms, their fronds rustling softly above, like distant whispers. The ground beneath them is cooler, dappled with shifting patches of shadow. Each step feels like a brief sip of relief, but soon the trees thin out, and you emerge into an open clearing where the marketplace has sprung to life. Stalls made of wooden poles and stretched linen offer strips of shade. Reed mats lie rolled out on the ground. each one displaying goods that tell the story of someone's labor. Clay pots of varying sizes, baskets woven tightly with palm fibers, piles of onions tied together by their stalks, jars of fragrant oils, and stacks of linen garments dyed with soft, natural pigments. The air here feels different, thicker with scents, warmer with movement. You smell fresh herbs, dusty grain, the bright sweetness of figs, and the earthy musk of livestock. The sounds blend into a tapestry of gentle noise, merchants calling out greetings, goats bleating softly as they lead through the crowd, women negotiating prices with playful stubbornness, and children weaving between stalls with bundles of goods in their arms. A merchant waves you over with a friendly smile. He sits behind a row of tiny jars, each sealed with a cloth lid tied neatly with twine. Opening one, he holds it toward you. A warm, resinous fragrance drifts out, frankincense, precious and deeply valued. Another jar contains myrrh, darker and richer. These scents were offerings to gods, medicines for the sick, and treasures carried along trade routes, stretching far beyond the desert. You continue walking, brushing fingertips over a woven basket, as a craftswoman explains, with pride, how its pattern symbolizes the flow of the Nile. Her voice is soothing, smooth as the river she speaks of, and for a moment you feel yourself caught in the calmness of her presence. Just ahead, a scribe sits beneath a small canopy, carefully inscribing hieratic script onto a piece of pottery. His reed brush moves like a dancer, fluid, elegant, precise. People wait patiently for him to record transactions, names, or simple household notes. Writing is a respected skill here, a bridge between memory and permanence. A potter's wheel whirls nearby, spinning slowly as clay rises beneath skilled hands. The potter's fingers glide with an almost meditative grace, guiding the clay into shape, smoothing imperfections, coaxing the vessel into the world, as though whispering it into existence. But beneath all this beauty, you feel another truth. The marketplace is gentle, but it is also demanding. The sun heats the linen roofs, dust sneaks into every fold of cloth, every crease of skin. The constant movement pulls at your senses, and the murmur of voices, though calming, ever fully stills. The people here navigate it effortlessly. They were raised in this environment, shaped by it. They know how to move slowly, conserve energy, and work with the heat instead of against it. You, however, feel the beginning of a quiet weariness. The warmth presses against your temples. The sounds, though soft, begin to blur into one another. The brightness of the day seems to cling to your eyes, and still, the marketplace continues around you, steady, ancient, unbroken. In this land, even the simple act of shopping is a lesson in endurance. Leaving the lively hum of the marketplace behind, you follow a narrow trail leading toward a quieter but no less important part of the village. Here, the air carries a different texture, warmer and heavier, tinged with the scent of dust and the faint metallic temps of worked stone. This is where the craftsmen gather, those who shape the bones of ancient Egypt, piece by patient piece. The path curves gently, and soon you hear it, the soft, steady tink, tink, tink of chisels tapping against limestone. The sound is almost musical, echoing lightly against the mud brick walls and drifting into the stillness like notes from a distant instrument. As you approach, the heat deepens, not the blazing heat of the sun, but that of the work itself, radiating from fires used to soften stone and harden clay. A group of stonecutters kneels before a row of partially shaped blocks. They work with calm precision, their movements slow, economical, and deeply focused. Their tools are simple hammerstones, chisels, wooden mallets, but the shapes emerging beneath their hands are clean and elegant. Each strike is measured, guided by knowledge passed down through countless generations. A master craftsman pauses as you draw near. He wipes his brow with a cloth and gives you a gentle nod. Despite the demanding labor, his expression is serene, marked not by exhaustion but by patience. To him, shaping stone is a quiet conversation with the material one that cannot be rushed. He gestures toward a half-finished piece nearby, a small statue of a reclining cat, its form already graceful, its face beginning to emerge from the pale limestone. Even unfinished, it seems to hold a spark of life. Further ahead, a pair of workers tend to a small kiln where clay pots bake in the glowing orange heat. The flames whisper softly, casting flickering shadows across their faces. They move with practiced coordination, placing pots inside with long wooden paddles, rotating others that have already begun to harden, and removing cooled pieces with gentle care. The air around the kiln feels thick, warm enough that even standing nearby makes your breath slow and shallow. Next to them, rows of newly formed pottery dry in the sun. Some are tall storage jars, their surfaces smooth and slightly glossy. Others are smaller, decorated with simple etched patterns or painted with earth-toned pigments. Every household depends on these vessels for water, grain, oil, beer, and offerings. These creations are humble but essential. A carpenter works beneath a shaded canopy, carving a long wooden beam. His knife glides smoothly through the acacia wood, releasing a scent both sweet and earthy. Shavings curl like delicate spirals at his feet. His hands are calloused, but his touch is gentle. With each pass, the beam becomes straighter, cleaner, ready to support the frame of a home or the structure of a small boat. Despite the intensity of their labor, the craftsmen speak softly among themselves, sharing small jokes, asking for a tool to be passed from one to another. There is a sense of companionship here, a quiet solidarity born from shared skill and shared heat. As you watch them work, you notice something else: the way they breathe, slowly, evenly, as though they've learned to match their lungs to the rhythm of the day, conserving energy not by stopping, but by moving with calm, deliberate intention. You, however, feel the warmth gathering on your skin, the heaviness settling in your limbs. The air is dry, pulling moisture from your breath with every inhalation. The work here isn't violent or frantic, but it tests your patience, your endurance, your ability to remain steady in the face of unyielding elements. For the craftsman, this is simply life. For someone unused to such conditions, it's a quiet, humbling challenge. And yet, there is beauty in this place, in the soft sparkle of dust drifting in sunlight, in the rhythmic tapping of stone, in the glow of the kiln's fire, in the slow, intentional shaping of a world built to last for centuries. Here, creation is not hurried, it is reverent. The sun continues its steady ascent, climbing toward a place in the sky where shadows grow thin and the air begins to shimmer with invisible waves of heat. This time of day is known to everyone in ancient Egypt, prepared for and approached with caution. You feel it immediately. The world is bright, almost too bright, as if the sun has drawn a curtain of gold across the land and refuses to let anything hide beneath it. You walk through the village once more, but now everything looks different. The gentle hues of morning have sharpened into stark contrasts. Walls glow white golden. Sand radiates warmth through the soles of your feet. Even the river reflects the light in a dazzling sheet, its surface gleaming like polished bronze. People begin to slow their pace, not out of laziness, but wisdom. They know how to move with the sun, not against it. A woman carrying a basket of vegetables pauses beneath the partial shade of an overhanging roof. She adjusts the linen scarf draped across her head, securing it carefully to protect her neck. Her breathing remains calm and even, her movements deliberate. She waits for the intensity to ease just a little before continuing. A man leading to donkeys stops at a water trough. He pours cool water over their backs, watching as it trickles down their flanks and disappears into the thirsty air. The animals relax visibly, their ears swiveling gently as they drink. The man pats their sides with quiet affection, murmuring to them with the tenderness of someone who understands how deeply they depend on each other. The potter's kiln, which glowed bright earlier, now crackles softly as the fire is allowed to rest. The workers step away from it, wiping their foreheads and sipping from clay cups of water. They sit in the shade cast by a tall date palm, speaking in low voices about the coming harvest, the state of the river, the well-being of their families. Even now, their attention returns always to the land, its signs, its moods, its needs. Children who played freely earlier now retreat indoors, where the mud brick walls offer coolness. You hear faint laughter inside one home, where siblings sit together weaving small toys from reeds. Their giggles drift faintly through the doorway, softened by the heavy warmth of the air. You pass a scribe seated beneath a linen awning. He has paused his writing, his tools laid neatly beside his papyrus. Instead, he gazes calmly at the bright sky, waiting for the harshest light to pass. His fingers trace absent patterns in the dust, perhaps the beginnings of a thought, a word, a memory he will later put to ink. Even the animals sense the shift. Goats gather beneath a sheltered wall. Dogs curl in the shadow of clay jars. Birds retreat into the dense canopies of palm trees. Only the cicadas seem energized, their soft, steady hum adding a dreamlike quality to the shimmering air. You feel the heat most of all. It presses gently but insistently against your shoulders, your face, your breath. It isn't cruel, but it is relentless. Your body begins to slow on instinct, mirroring the rhythm of the people around you, learning from their steadiness. In ancient Egypt, survival at midday is not about strength, it is about respect. Respect for the sun, respect for the environment, respect for the body's limits. A nearby elder, sitting with her back against a shaded wall, smiles as you pass. Her voice is warm, soft, and calm as she offers a simple piece of advice in her own tongue, a reminder treasured by all generations here. Walk with the day, not through it, and as the sun reaches its peak, you begin to understand just what she means. Midday settles fully over the land now, and ancient Egypt enters a rare moment of stillness, a pause carved gently into the day like a cool basin carved into warm stone. This is the resting hour, a time when the sun's intensity is acknowledged with quiet surrender, and life folds into the shade for a brief, précieux reprieve. You step into one of the homes, invited by a family who sees the heat beginning to wear on you. The doorway hangs with a reed curtain, its strands clicking softly as you pass through. Inside, the air feels noticeably cooler. Mud brick walls are thick, made for exactly this purpose, shielding those within from the scorching brilliance outside. The light that filters in is soft and muted, like water passing through cloudy glass. A low table sits near the center of the room, with small clay cups arranged neatly on its surface. The woman of the house pours cool water into one and offers it to you with a gentle nod. The water tastes faintly of Clearthy, refreshing, grounding. It soothes your throat, warmed by walking, and cools your core from the inside out. In a corner, a woven mat is laid out, softened by years of use. A young boy rests upon it, half asleep, his breaths slow and steady. His little sister sits beside him, plaiting strands of palm fiber into thin cords while humming a tune that sounds like it belongs to the river itself. Gentle, repetitive, calming. The man of the house sits nearby, sharpening a small farming blade with measured strokes, not out of urgency, but out of habit. The resting hour does not stop preparation, it simply softens it. His movements are unhurried, his expression peaceful. He acknowledges you with a nod of quiet welcome. From the kitchen area drifts the faint scent of lentils simmering slowly in a clay pot. Food here is simple, but nourishing grains, beans, vegetables grown from the Nile's blessing. A small oil lamp, though unlit in the daytime, sits ready for evening, its wick trimmed neatly. The shaded silence is not empty, it's filled with soft layers of life. The faint rustle of reeds in the curtain, the slow bubbling of the cooking pot, the distant call of a heron by the river, the rhythmic sharpening of the farmer's blade, all of it blends into a peaceful hum that invites rest, not just for the body, but for the mind. You sit beside the wall, feeling the coolness of the mud brick against your back. Outside, the sun burns bright and fierce, but in here, time stretches gently. Your breath begins to slow, matching the quiet pace around you. This moment reveals something vital about life in ancient Egypt. People survive not through constant struggle, but through harmony, knowing when to work, when to pause, when to yield to nature rather than resist it. This is wisdom shaped over centuries, passed from parent to child like a treasured heirloom. As you listen to the soft household sounds, you feel your own edges soften. The heat outside may be powerful, but inside these walls, calmness reigns. It's a kind of magic one, woven not from spells or secrets, but from understanding the rhythm of the world. And in this rare, tranquil hour, even you begin to feel it. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the day begins to shift again. The relentless blaze of midday eases into something gentler, like a hand loosening its grip. Inside the shaded home, you feel the subtle change before you even see it. The air becomes slightly less heavy, the warmth less insistently pressing against your skin. The family begins to stir. The young boy, who had been dozing on the woven mat, blinks awake with slow, sleepy movements. His sister sets aside the cord she was braiding, stretching her arms above her head as though greeting the returning breeze. Even the farmer stops sharpening his blade for a moment, listening to the quiet outside with practiced intuition. It's time to rise again. You follow them out through the doorway, and sunlight spills across the threshold, still bright, but no longer harsh. The world seems calmer now. The sky remains a deep, brilliant blue, but the golden haze that shimmered earlier has softened, like fabric settling into gentle folds. Stepping outside, you notice how the village itself exhales. People begin to emerge from their homes one by one, moving with the slow, renewed purpose that the late afternoon allows. The shadows stretch long and cool across the ground, creating safe paths of shade where the sun once ruled alone. The breeze that returns carries with it a delicate mix of scents: warm earth, crushed reeds, distant cooking fires, and the faint sweetness of ripening dates. Palm trees rustle overhead, their fronds whispering like storytellers greeting one another after a quiet pause. Workers who had retreated earlier now return to their tasks. The stonecutters resume their tapping, though the sound is softer now, as though the stone itself welcomes the cooler air. Women carrying baskets walk toward the communal well, chatting gently as they draw up cool water, the rope creaking softly over the wooden beam. A group of boys leads cattle from their shaded resting place toward the fields once more. Dust puffs around their feet as they walk, turning golden in the slanting sunlight. The animals move slowly, lazily swishing their tails, grateful for the break in the heat. Near the river, fishermen begin preparing their nets for another outing. They inspect each knot carefully, ensuring that nothing has loosened in the earlier hours. Their hands move with a kind of meditative certainty, shaped by years of working with the Nile. You feel the welcome shift in your own body as well. The oppressive warmth of midday fades into a manageable glow. Your steps become lighter. Your breath feels easier. This is the time of day when ancient Egypt breathes deeply, again renewed, steady, ready to continue. The elder you met earlier sits outside her home now, leaning on her walking stick as she watches the people return to their tasks. She smiles at you once more, her eyes glowing like softened amber in the afternoon light. There is something in that smile, a quiet acknowledgement that you've made it through one of the day's greatest challenges. But the day is far from over. More awaits you, more work, more beauty, more lessons carried by the rhythm of the Nile. For now, though, you simply stand for a moment, letting the breeze drift past you, letting the gentle sunlight settle on your shoulders. The shadowless hour is behind you. The world feels kind again, and so the afternoon begins. The courtyard greets you with a hush that feels almost sacred, as though the early sun has pinned a golden stillness across every stone it touches. You step forward, letting your eyes wander over the wide expanse, smooth limestone flooring warmed by the morning light, tall palm shadows stretching thin and soft, and the distant murmur of life unfolding within the palace walls. The air carries a dry, pleasant heat now, the kind that wraps around your shoulders like a light shawl rather than the oppressive blanket it becomes later in the day. You breathe it in as though learning the rhythm of this ancient land. Slow, dust-scented, patient. Somewhere nearby, an ibis lets out a sound that echoes across the open space, a hollow, flute-like call that seems to drift into the sky. A line of servants crosses the far end of the courtyard, carrying baskets of reeds, water jugs, and bundles of linen. They move in unison, as if each step is part of a centuries-old pattern. You notice the soft scuff of their sandals against the stone, the way the breeze lifts the edges of their garments, the faint clink of ceramic against ceramic. You take a moment to simply stand there, feeling small but safe in this vast, ancient place. The sunlight pours over you like warm honey, and for a moment, everything around you becomes slow and dreamlike. Even the sound of distant bells, small metal discs tapping gently together, seems softened by the morning air. A narrow channel of water runs along one edge of the courtyard, a small engineered marvel designed to carry precious water through the palace grounds. You kneel beside it, watching the thin current slide past, its surface shimmering like polished bronze. The movement feels hypnotic, steady, comforting. As you trace a fingertip above the ripples, you sense how vital water is here, how every drop is treasured, every channel cared for. A gentle wind lifts grains of sand across the stone, creating a faint whisper as they slide. You listen, finding something soothing in the minimal music of it. Everything in this courtyard feels intentional, balanced: light, sound, movement, warmth. It is a space that exists not to rush you forward, but to teach you the quiet patience of this land. And as you rise again, brushing off your hands, you can't help but feel that ancient Egypt is revealing itself to you, one breath, one glimmer of sunlight, one drifting shadow at a time. You step from the open courtyard into a quieter corridor, one tucked between workshops where the palace artisans begin their day. The shift in atmosphere is gentle but unmistakable here. The air hums with a softer kind of purpose, the kind that comes from steady hands shaping beauty out of raw material. The passage is narrow enough that the shadows seem to cling to the walls, yet not so dark as to feel confining. Thin shafts of sunlight slip through carved wooden screens, painting the floor with intricate patterns of gold. Each movement you make causes the light to shimmer and scatter, as though the corridor itself breathes in slow rhythms. From the first doorway drifts the scent of fresh-cut cedar. It mingles with a faint trace of oil and old dust, forming a smell that feels strangely comforting, warm, earthy, full of quiet craft. You pause and listen. Inside, a carver works with calm precision, his chisel tapping gently against wood. The sound is steady, almost meditative, like a heartbeat softened by years of practice. Farther along, the murmur of grinding stone rolls through the stillness. A sculptor hunches over a block of alabaster, using smooth, deliberate motions to coax out the early outline of a small figurine. The dust lifts in pale clouds, caught by the sunbeams drifting through the screens. When he exhales, it looks as if the air glitters around him. You move slowly, letting yourself linger at each workshop entrance. A weaver sits cross-legged near a loom, fingers dancing along threads dyed with ochre and deep indigo. The man pats their sides with quiet affection, murmuring to them with the tenderness of someone who understands how deeply they depend on each other. The potter's kiln, which glowed bright earlier, now crackles softly as the fire is allowed to rest. The workers step away from it, wiping their foreheads and sipping from clay cups of water. They sit in the shade cast by a tall date palm, speaking in low voices about the coming harvest, the state of the river, the well-being of their families. Even now, their attention returns always to the land, its signs, its moods, its needs. Children who played freely earlier now retreat indoors, where the mud brick walls offer coolness. You hear faint laughter inside one home, where siblings sit together weaving small toys from reeds. Their giggles drift faintly through the doorway, softened by the heavy warmth of the air. You pass a scribe seated beneath a linen awning. He has paused his writing, his tools laid neatly beside his papyrus. Instead, he gazes calmly at the bright sky, waiting for the harshest light to pass. His fingers trace absent patterns in the dust, perhaps the beginnings of a thought, a word, a memory he will later put to ink. Even the animals sense the shift. Goats gather beneath a sheltered wall. Dogs curl in the shadow of clay jars. Birds retreat into the dense canopies of palm trees. Only the cicadas seem energized, their soft, steady hum adding a dreamlike quality to the shimmering air. You feel the heat most of all. It presses gently but insistently against your shoulders, your face, your breath. It isn't cruel, but it is relentless. Your body begins to slow on instinct, mirroring the rhythm of the people around you, learning from their steadiness. In ancient Egypt, survival at midday is not about strength, it is about respect. Respect for the sun, respect for the environment, respect for the body's limits. A nearby elder, sitting with her back against a shaded wall, smiles as you pass. Her voice is warm, soft, and calm as she offers a simple piece of advice in her own tongue, a reminder, treasured by all generations here. Walk with the day, not through it, and as the sun reaches its peak, you begin to understand just what she means. Midday settles fully over the land now, and ancient Egypt enters a rare moment of stillness, a pause carved gently into the day like a cool basin carved into warm stone. This is the resting hour, a time when the sun's intensity is acknowledged with quiet surrender, and life folds into the shade for a brief, précieux reprieve. You step into one of the homes, invited by a family who sees the heat beginning to wear on you. The doorway hangs with a reed curtain, its strands clicking softly as you pass through. Inside, the air feels noticeably cooler. Mud brick walls are thick, made for exactly this purpose, shielding those within from the scorching brilliance outside. The light that filters in is soft and muted, like water passing through cloudy glass. A low table sits near the center of the room, with small clay cups arranged neatly on its surface. The woman of the house pours cool water into one, and offers it to you with a gentle nod. The water tastes faintly of Clearthea, refreshing, grounding. It soothes your throat, warmed by walking, and cools your core from the inside out. In a corner, a woven mat is laid out, softened by years of use. A young boy rests upon it, half asleep, his breaths slow and steady. His little sister sits beside him, plaiting strands of palm fiber into thin cords while humming a tune that sounds like it belongs to the river itself. Gentle, repetitive, calming. The man of the house sits nearby, sharpening a small farming blade with measured strokes, not out of urgency, but out of habit. The resting hour does not stop preparation, it simply softens it. His movements are unhurried, his expression peaceful. He acknowledges you with a nod of quiet welcome. From the kitchen area drifts the faint scent of lentils simmering slowly in a clay pot. Food here is simple, but nourishing grains, beans, vegetables grown from the Nile's blessing. A small oil lamp, though unlit in the daytime, sits ready for evening, its wick trimmed neatly. The shaded silence is not empty, it's filled with soft layers of life. The faint rustle of reeds in the curtain, the slow bubbling of the cooking pot, the distant call of a heron by the river, the rhythmic sharpening of the farmer's blade, all of it blends into a peaceful hum that invites rest, not just for the body, but for the mind. You sit beside the wall, feeling the coolness of the mud brick against your back. Outside, the sun burns bright and fierce, but in here, time stretches gently. Your breath begins to slow, matching the quiet pace around you. This moment reveals something vital about life in ancient Egypt. People survive not through constant struggle, but through harmony, knowing when to work, when to pause, when to yield to nature rather than resist it. This is wisdom shaped over centuries, passed from parent to child like a treasured heirloom. As you listen to the soft household sounds, you feel your own edges soften. The heat outside may be powerful, but inside these walls, calmness reigns. It's a kind of magic one, woven not from spells or secrets, but from understanding the rhythm of the world. And in this rare, tranquil hour, even you begin to feel it. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the day begins to shift again. The relentless blaze of midday eases into something gentler, like a hand loosening its grip. Inside the shaded home, you feel the subtle change before you even see it. The air becomes slightly less heavy, the warmth less insistently pressing against your skin. The family begins to stir. The young boy, who had been dozing on the woven mat, blinks awake with slow, sleepy movements. His sister sets aside the cord she was braiding, stretching her arms above her head as though greeting the returning breeze. Even the farmer stops sharpening his blade for a moment, listening to the quiet outside with practiced intuition. It's time to rise again. You follow them out through the doorway, and sunlight spills across the threshold, still bright, but no longer harsh. The world seems calmer now. The sky remains a deep, brilliant blue, but the golden haze that shimmered earlier has softened, like fabric settling into gentle folds. Stepping outside, you notice how the village itself exhales. People begin to emerge from their homes one by one, moving with the slow, renewed purpose that the late afternoon allows. The shadows stretch long and cool across the ground, creating safe paths of shade where the sun once ruled alone. The breeze that returns carries with it a delicate mix of scents: warm earth, crushed reeds, distant cooking fires, and the faint sweetness of ripening dates. Palm trees rustle overhead, their fronds whispering like storytellers greeting one another after a quiet pause. Workers who had retreated earlier now return to their tasks. The stonecutters resume their tapping, though the sound is softer now, as though the stone itself welcomes the cooler air. Women carrying baskets walk toward the communal well, chatting gently as they draw up cool water, the rope creaking softly over the wooden beam. A group of boys leads cattle from their shaded resting place toward the fields once more. Dust puffs around their feet as they walk, turning golden in the slanting sunlight. The animals move slowly, lazily swishing their tails, grateful for the break in the heat. Near the river, fishermen begin preparing their nets for another outing. They inspect each knot carefully, ensuring that nothing has loosened in the earlier hours. Their hands move with a kind of meditative certainty, shaped by years of working with the Nile. You feel the welcome shift in your own body as well. The oppressive warmth of midday fades into a manageable glow. Your steps become lighter. Your breath feels easier. This is the time of day when ancient Egypt breathes deeply, again renewed, steady, ready to continue. The elder you met earlier sits outside her home now, leaning on her walking stick as she watches the people return to their tasks. She smiles at you once more, her eyes glowing like softened amber in the afternoon light. There is something in that smile, a quiet acknowledgement that you've made it through one of the day's greatest challenges. But the day is far from over. More awaits you, more work, more beauty, more lessons carried by the rhythm of the Nile. For now, though, you simply stand for a moment, letting the breeze drift past you, letting the gentle sunlight settle on your shoulders. The shadowless hour is behind you. The world feels kind again, and so the afternoon begins. The courtyard greets you with a hush that feels almost sacred, as though the early sun has pinned a golden stillness across every stone it touches. You step forward, letting your eyes wander over the wide expanse, smooth limestone flooring warmed by the morning light, tall palm shadows stretching thin and soft, and the distant murmur of life unfolding within the palace walls. The air carries a dry, pleasant heat now, the kind that wraps around your shoulders like a light shawl rather than the oppressive blanket it becomes later in the day. You breathe it in as though learning the rhythm of this ancient land. Slow, dust-scented, patient. Somewhere nearby, an ibis lets out a sound that echoes across the open space, a hollow, flute-like call that seems to drift into the sky. A line of servants crosses the far end of the courtyard, carrying baskets of reeds, water jugs, and bundles of linen. They move in unison, as if each step is part of a centuries-old pattern. You notice the soft scuff of their sandals against the stone, the way the breeze lifts the edges of their garments, the faint clink of ceramic against ceramic. You take a moment to simply stand there, feeling small but safe in this vast, ancient place. The sunlight pours over you like warm honey, and for a moment, everything around you becomes slow and dreamlike. Even the sound of distant bells, small metal discs tapping gently together, seems softened by the morning air. A narrow channel of water runs along one edge of the courtyard, a small engineered marvel designed to carry precious water through the palace grounds. You kneel beside it, watching the thin current slide past, its surface shimmering like polished bronze. The movement feels hypnotic, steady, comforting. As you trace a fingertip above the ripples, you sense how vital water is here, how every drop is treasured, every channel cared for. A gentle wind lifts grains of sand across the stone, creating a faint whisper as they slide. You listen, finding something soothing in the minimal music of it. Everything in this courtyard feels intentional, balanced: light, sound, movement, warmth. It is a space that exists not to rush you forward, but to teach you the quiet patience of this land. And as you rise again, brushing off your hands, you can't help but feel that ancient Egypt is revealing itself to you, one breath, one glimmer of sunlight, one drifting shadow at a time. You step from the open courtyard into a quieter corridor, one tucked between workshops where the palace artisans begin their day. The shift in atmosphere is gentle but unmistakable here. The air hums with a softer kind of purpose, the kind that comes from steady hands shaping beauty out of raw material. The passage is narrow enough that the shadows seem to cling to the walls, yet not so dark as to feel confining. Thin shafts of sunlight slip through carved wooden screens, painting the floor with intricate patterns of gold. Each movement you make causes the light to shimmer and scatter, as though the corridor itself breathes in slow rhythms. From the first doorway drifts the scent of fresh-cut cedar. It mingles with a faint trace of oil and old dust, forming a smell that feels strangely comforting, warm, earthy, full of quiet craft. You pause and listen. Inside, a carver works with calm precision, his chisel tapping gently against wood. The sound is steady, almost meditative, like a heartbeat softened by years of practice. Farther along, the murmur of grinding stone rolls through the stillness. A sculptor hunches over a block of alabaster, using smooth, deliberate motions to coax out the early outline of a small figurine. The dust lifts in pale clouds, caught by the sunbeams drifting through the screens. When he exhales, it looks as if the air glitters around him. You move slowly, letting yourself linger at each workshop entrance. A weaver sits cross-legged near a loom, fingers dancing along threads dyed with ochre and deep indigo. With each movement of her hands, the fabric grows soft, patterned, and purposeful. The rhythmic clacking of the loom blends with the distant tapping from the woodshop, forming a gentle concert of creation. Even the floor beneath your feet tells a story. Centuries of sandals have worn subtle curves into the stone-smooth paths that guide you naturally forward. You follow them, feeling the faint warmth rising from the ground as the sun climbs higher. The air begins to smell faintly of wet clay as you approach another room where pottery cools on shelves after spending the night in an oven-like kiln. Every artisan you pass moves with peaceful intention, as though they are not merely working but participating in a ritual as old as the kingdom itself. Their calm focus is contagious, slowing your breath, quieting your thoughts, making you feel as though time in this passage runs at its own unhurried pace. And as you reach the end of the corridor, stepping into a widening space where light spills freely, you sense that the path ahead will continue to show you how ancient Egypt lived, breathed, and shaped a world of wonder. One deliberate stroke at a time, you step into a small walled garden tucked gently between two administrative halls, a sanctuary designed for the kingdom's scribes to rest their minds before returning to their long hours of work. The shift from the artisan's corridor is almost dreamlike where, before there were soft taps and murmuring tools, here there is a deeper stillness, cushioned by the rustle of leaves and the faint burble of water. The garden opens like a calm breath. A few acacia trees spread their branches over the space, their leaves filtering the midday light into soft, broken patches across the ground. The warmth of the sun is gentled here, turned from sharp desert heat into something more like a warm hand resting against your cheek. A narrow path winds through pale gravel, crunching softly under your footsteps. Each step feels unhurried, placed with intention, as though the ground itself encourages you to slow your pace. Tiny desert flowers, dusty lilac, muted gold, and soft white grow along the edges, their petals trembling gently whenever the breeze drifts through. At the center of the garden is a tiny pool, no wider than the length of your arm. Its water is still enough that the sky reflects perfectly across its surface, turning it into a quiet mirror. A single papyrus stalk grows beside it, slender and delicate, its tufted crown trembling as though whispering secrets to the wind. A pair of young scribes sits under the shade of a fig tree, each with a reed pen tucked behind an ear. One of them absently rolls a clay seal between his fingers, watching dust swirl as sunlight catches it. Their conversation is hushed, carried out in tones warm and low, the kind people use when they are both working and resting at the same time. You walk past them, hearing the soft scrape of papyrus sheets being shifted and the faint hiss as someone smooths a fresh page with a stone. The sounds blend into the environment like they belong, here quiet, thoughtful, soothing. The air smells faintly of crushed leaves and cool water, mingled with the subtle sweetness of ripe figs hanging just above your head. A sparrow hops along the rim of the pool, dipping its beak with quick, light movements, then fluttering off in a burst of tiny wings. You pause beneath the acacia canopy, letting the dapples of sunlight drift across your shoulders. Here, time seems to loosen, unraveling from its usual tightness. You can almost imagine yourself as one of the scribes resting before a long afternoon of careful writing, letting the mind settle like dust in a warm, calm room. The garden holds you gently, as though ancient Egypt is offering you a moment of stillness, showing you that even in a world defined by labor and ritual, there are places where breath can deepen and thoughts can soften into quiet shape. And as you step toward the far gate, preparing to continue your journey, a warm breeze sweeps across the garden, carrying with it the promise of yet more wonders ahead. You pass beneath a low stone lintel and enter a broad, dimly lit hall where every surface seems to glow with ancient color. The air changes immediately cooler, calmer, and faintly scented with mineral pigments, like ground earth mixed with quiet memory. The soft echo of your steps seems to pause before floating upward, absorbed by centuries-old walls. The hall stretches long, its pillars tall and evenly spaced, carved with careful precision. Gentle rays of sunlight spill through narrow slits near the ceiling, casting thin, golden stripes that drift across the floor like sunbeams resting on a river. As your eyes adjust, the true wonder of this place reveals itself. The walls are alive with painted scenes, not moving, but vibrant, so filled with detail that your imagination stirs them into motion. Every inch of stone is covered with figures in profile. Farmers bending over fields, dancers mid-step, nobles reclining at feasts, priests raising offerings to unseen deities. The pigments have faded with time, yet they still hold warm reds, deep blacks, desert yellows, and soft greens, like whispers of the colors they once were. You slow your pace to a soft glide, absorbing each scene as though it might disappear if you blink too quickly. A painted hunter draws back a bowstring, his posture so precise you can almost hear the soft creak of the wood. Nearby, a fisherman stands in a small reed boat, his net raised above shimmering strokes of painted water. Farther down the wall, a mother gently holds her child, the lines tender and simple. The figures seem peaceful, captured in a moment that survives long after their real lives faded into dust. There is something soothing in the stillness of it, like the past is not gone, only sleeping quietly under layers of paint. A gentle hush fills the hall, broken only by the soft shuffle of a palace attendant sweeping sand from the doorway. His broom makes the faintest scratching sound, a steady, rhythmic motion that blends seamlessly with the calm of the room. He nods politely as you pass, his eyes warm, as though he understands the awe this place inspires in visitors. The further you walk, the more the scenes shift, moving from daily life to the world of gods and myth. You see Ra sailing across the sky in a golden boat, his presence depicted with strokes that still glimmer. Isis lifts her wings protectively around Osiris, the feathers of her painted wings finely detailed, even after all these years. Strange creatures, half human and half animal, cluster around the edges of the murals, guardians of realms unseen. The hall feels like a bridge between worlds, quiet, unaware of time, filled with stories told not in words but in color and line. You run your fingertips lightly along the air near the wall, not touching, but close enough to feel the coolness rising from the stone. It feels steady, eternal, patient. A soft breeze filters through one of the ceiling slits, stirring a faint rustle of dust across the floor. The warm light shifts delicately, illuminating a final mural near the end of the hall, a long procession of people carrying offerings, flowers, bread, jars of perfumed oil, walking toward a temple whose shape seems to glow with the remaining pigments. You pause there, letting the calmness settle deep inside you. In this hall, ancient Egypt doesn't feel distant. It feels present, quietly speaking through its painted stories, inviting you to step gently, breathe slowly, and listen. When you finally turn toward the next doorway, the colors seem to linger in your mind, as though the walls have shared their dreams with you. You step through a tall, narrow doorway, and instantly the air around you feels different, cooler, smoother, as though this chamber was carved for quiet rather than activity. The space opens gradually before your eyes, revealing a long hall supported by massive columns that rise like stone trees reaching toward a shadowed ceiling. Your footsteps fall softly, yet in this chamber they carry a gentle echo, a muted tap that drifts a moment before dissolving into the stillness. It's not loud or startling, more like a distant memory repeating itself, a reminder that countless people have walked these same stones long before you. The floor beneath you is cool underfoot, polished by centuries of passing sandals. The stone has a slight grain to it, and when the light catches just right, it reveals tiny minerals sparkling like grains of gold folded into the earth. You shift your weight slowly as you walk, appreciating the smoothness, the faint chill that rises from the depths of the palace foundation. Soft beams of sun filter through small high-cut windows, forming slender shafts of warm light that hang in the air like floating ribbons. Dust motes drift lazily within them, rising and falling as though caught in a silent, unseen tide. When you pause to watch, the whole chamber seems to breathe slow, rhythmic, unhurried. Along the walls, tall niches hold clay jars sealed with wax. Their rounded shapes catch the dim light, casting gentle shadows on the stone behind them. A faint aroma lingers in the air, subtle traces of herbs once stored here, or oils sealed away long ago. The scent is earthy and grounding, like dried leaves warmed by the sun. You move past one of the columns and trail your fingers lightly across its surface. The stone is cool and textured, carved with faint vertical grooves that guide your touch as though they are quietly directing you through the room. The grooves give the impression of age, not worn-down age, but graceful, intentional age, the kind built with patience. From somewhere deeper in the hall, a soft sound resounds, a heartbeat like thump, rhythmic and distant. You soon realize it's the quiet work of attendants moving large baskets of grain, their steps measured and gentle. You hear them before you see them, two figures silhouetted against the far light, balancing their loads with steady steps that echo softly in this chamber of calm. As they pass you, they offer small, polite nods, neither hurried nor distracted. Their presence adds a comforting human warmth to the cool room, grounding the ancient stillness with everyday life. You walk farther in, and the acoustics shift. Here, even your breath sounds different, the chamber shaping each exhale into a soft, rounded whisper. The sensation is soothing, almost meditative, as though the room was designed to quiet the mind and soften the spirit. A tall doorway waits at the far end, its edges glowing faintly where sunlight grazes the threshold. As you approach it, the echo of your footsteps grows gentler until it fades entirely, replaced by the softer ambience of whatever lies beyond. You pause for a final moment inside the cavernous calm of the chamber, letting the stillness settle like warm dust around your shoulders. Your heartbeat slows. Your breathing deepens. Ancient Egypt, with all its weight and wonder, feels closer than ever, steady, patient, and entirely unhurried. Then, with a slow, steady breath, you step toward the awaiting light. As you step through the sunlit doorway, you find yourself entering a long corridor where the temperature shifts once again, cooler, softer, almost like sinking into shade after a long day beneath the desert sun. The difference is subtle but comforting, as though the very walls were shaped to hold the night's chill long after morning has risen. The corridor is narrow and stretches far ahead, its length vanishing into a soft haze of dim light. Smooth limestone blocks form the walls, each one fitted so precisely that the seams are nearly invisible. Your fingertips graze the surface as you walk, and the stone feels pleasantly cool in that soothing way that reminds you of shaded riverbanks and early dawn breezes. Gentle beams of light filter down through small square openings near the ceiling. They fall in soft, pale columns that illuminate floating dust in slow, graceful spirals. Each beam seems like a tiny stage where time performs its slowest dance. Your footsteps make almost no sound here. The floor is sanded smooth, and your steps glide rather than echo, giving the corridor a quiet, dreamlike quality. Even your breathing seems to settle into a gentler rhythm, the calm of the space drawing your body and mind into an easy stillness. To your left, occasional alcoves open like shallow pockets in the wall. Some hold baskets woven from reeds, filled with linen folded neatly into pale layers. Others cradle ceramic jars stoppered with mud seals, their rounded sides dappled with light. A faint scent of linen dust and clay rises from them, soft and earthy, comforting in its simplicity. Farther along, the corridor widens slightly, allowing more sunlight to spill across the floor. Here, you notice the trace of old paint on one section of stone, faint lines of reddish ochre and deep blue forming the remnants of a decorative border. Though faded, the design is still elegant, like a quiet whisper of the palace's more vibrant past. You pause to admire it, imagining how the colors once shone brightly under oil lamps, flickering in warm oranges and golds as people passed by long ago. The memory of paint seems to soften the entire corridor, giving it the feeling of a hallway meant not just for passage, but for quiet reflection. A gentle breeze moves suddenly through the passage, brushing past your cheeks with a whisper of coolness. It carries the faintest sense fresh water from somewhere deep in the palace, sand warmed by sunlight, and something floral drifting from a distant courtyard. The mixture is subtle and calming, like the softest exhale of the desert itself. As you continue walking, the corridor curves slightly to the right. The turn is gentle, designed so that you feel it before you see it, a gradual shift in shadow, a new angle of light brushing across the floor. At the bend, the air grows even cooler, hinting that you are moving toward a part of the palace sheltered from the harshest sun. The quiet here is deep, but not empty. It feels full of waiting, full of possibility, like the palace is gently guiding you onward, one softened footstep at a time. At the far end of the corridor, you see the outline of another doorway, wide and inviting, where the light takes on a warm, amber glow. The next space promises something different, perhaps another world of texture, scent, and stillness waiting just beyond. You take one more slow breath, letting the coolness of the stone settle inside you. Before moving forward, you step through the amber-lit doorway and enter a room where the sound reaches you before the sight does. A soft, steady trickle of water, like someone pouring sunlight through a narrow reed. The air grows cooler still, infused with a faint, refreshing scent, something like wet limestone, mingled with the pale sweetness of lotus petals. The chamber opens wide around you, circular in shape, its walls curving inward with graceful symmetry. A shallow pool rests at the center, no deeper than the height of your palm. Its surface glimmers like polished bronze, reflecting the filtered light that pours from small square skylights above. What little movement exists is caused by the gentle fall of water from a narrow spout carved into the stone wall, one delicate thread, falling endlessly, sending soft ripples drifting outward. You approach quietly, instinctively slowing your steps. The pool's edge is framed by smooth stone that has been worn silky by countless hands. When you kneel beside it, the coolness radiates upward like a soft breath, brushing your cheeks, calming the warmth on your skin. You lower your hand toward the surface, stopping just above it. Even without touching, you can feel the cool air rising from the water. The tiny ripples spread beneath your hovering fingers, catching the light in shimmering arcs. When you finally, gently touch the surface, the water greets you with a soft chill that deepens the sense of peace settling through your body. Around the pool, low stone benches curve along the walls. They are draped with thin linen cloths, cream-colored, clean, and faintly scented with oils that smell of desert herbs. A few of the palace attendants sit quietly along the edges, finishing early morning tasks. One polishes a small copper bowl with slow, circular motions, each movement glinting in the soft light. Another folds cloths with patient hands, smoothing each edge with gentle fingertips. The room feels sacred in a humble way, not a temple, but a place where people come to reset, to cool their thoughts and bodies before returning to the demands of palace life. Even the attendants move with reverence, as though aware that this room is meant for breathing a little deeper, thinking a little quieter. The stone walls hold faint carvings, reeds swaying in imagined water, ibises mid-stride, lotus blossoms. They are simple, almost playful in their design, as if meant to remind visitors that even in a place of labor and duty, beauty and rest still have a place. You sit on the bench nearest the pool, letting the cool air wash over your arms. A soft breeze drifts down from the skylights, carrying with it the distant murmur of life, outside voices, footsteps, the faint clatter of pottery muffled until they seem like echoes of a dream happening just beyond the walls. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the trickle of water. Each drop seems to mark time more gently than a clock ever could. It slows your thoughts, eases your breath, and fills the chamber with a calm that seeps into your bones. When you open your eyes again, the pool looks even more tranquil than before, as though it has been waiting patiently for you to continue your journey through this ancient, unhurried world. With one last lingering breath of the cool, lotus-scented air, you rise and turn toward the next doorway, ready for whatever quiet wonders lie ahead. You leave the chamber of gentle waters and step into a hall that rises tall and narrow, its height emphasized by a forest of slender columns arranged in perfect rows. The first thing you notice is how the air changes warm again, but softly so, like the warmth lingering on a clay pot left in early morning sun. It wraps around you gently, easing the coolness left on your skin from the water chamber. The columns themselves are carved with elegant vertical flutes, rising toward the ceiling in long, graceful lines. They look like bundled reeds turned to stone, thin, poised, almost delicate despite their size. The grooves catch the sunlight that filters through long slits high above, creating shimmering streaks of pale gold that glide down the columns like drifting silk. As you walk forward, your footsteps fall into a natural rhythm. The stone floor is smooth beneath you, warmed unevenly by the sunbeams crossing the hall. Patches of warmth and coolness alternate with each step, as though the floor itself is breathing softly under your feet. The space holds a deep hush, but not an empty one. It's the gentle quiet of a place meant for moving with purpose, but never with haste. Somewhere near the far end, an attendant walks slowly between two columns, the soft sweep of his sandals barely audible. His calm presence enhances the serenity, turning the hall into a living space of stillness. You pause beside one of the columns, running your hand lightly over its carved grooves. The stone is cool beneath your fingertips, its surface worn smooth but not slick, carrying the faintest texture like the skin of a river pebble. Dust glimmers where sunlight touches it, tiny particles suspended in the air, shifting with each breath of wind from the high vents. Above you, the ceiling is decorated with faded patterns. Muted blues and earthy reds form abstract shapes and faint floral designs, softened by centuries. Though dim, the artwork adds a gentle intimacy to the vastness of the space, as if the hall is quietly remembering the hands that once painted it. Halfway through, the hall opens slightly wider, forming a small alcove on either side. Stone benches sit against the walls, draped with folded linens. A faint smell of reed, matting, and desert herbs lingers there, warm and dry, evoking thoughts of sunlit courtyards and shaded rest. You sit for a moment, letting the stillness gather around you. The tall columns feel like guardians, silent, graceful, ancient. Their vertical lines draw your gaze upward, guiding your mind into calmer territory. You can almost hear the rustle of palms outside, softened by distance, blending with the warm hush of the hall. When you rise again, you continue your slow walk, the golden light shifting subtly as you pass beneath it. The far end of the hall glows more brightly, the light there richer, suggesting an opening to another room where the warmth deepens and the textures change once more. You take a slow breath, feeling the hall's serenity settle gently inside you, then move toward the brighter threshold ahead, each step unhurried, each moment softened by the timeless quiet of ancient Egypt. As you cross the brightened threshold at the end of the hall, the world opens again, wide, warm, and bathed in the soft gold of midday sun. The room you enter feels almost like a courtyard turned inward, a sheltered pocket where the desert's presence gently mingles with palace calm. The first thing you notice is the sand, smooth, pale, and carefully raked into flowing patterns across the floor. It isn't the wild sand of the open desert, shifting restlessly under the wind. No, this sand is serene, arranged in quiet waves and spirals, as though someone has traced the desert's breath into the earth with deliberate, meditative strokes. Light pours through an open square cut high into the ceiling, illuminating the patterns until they shimmer like ripples on a sunlit river. You step forward slowly, the sand whispering beneath your feet. It gives just slightly with each step, softening your movements, grounding you into the room's warm stillness. The air is dry but gentle, carrying the faint scent of sun-warmed grains, mingled with the subtle sweetness of resin from the wooden lattice that lines the upper walls. Along the perimeter, low stone platforms host simple objects of the desert: smooth pebbles, dried reeds, small bowls of ochre and chalk. A few of the stones bear faint carvings, soft lines etched into their surfaces, like quiet messages left by long-forgotten hands. You touch one gently, feeling its warmth, heat collected from the sunlight above, stored deep within the stone. A palace attendant kneels near the center of the room, using a long, curved reed rake to reshape the patterns in the sand. His movements are slow and intentional, each stroke drawing a new line that blends seamlessly with the one before. The soft rustle of sand follows his rhythm, an almost musical whisper. He looks peaceful, entirely absorbed in the quiet task. You stand for a moment simply to listen, the hush of shifting grains, the muted flap of linen curtains brushing the wall in a faint breeze, the distant coo of a pigeon perched somewhere near the ceiling opening. The atmosphere seems to slow not just your body but your thoughts, inviting them to settle into calm spirals like the patterns at your feet. On one wall, a large woven mat hangs like a tapestry. Its fibers form gentle stripes of warm tan and reddish brown. The texture looks coarse but comforting, reminding you of the desert horizon at dusk, when the world softens and the heat retreats into the sand. Another wall displays small clay vessels, round, smooth, simple. A few contain fragrant grains of incense. When a warm drift of air brushes past, the faintest aroma rises soft, woody, and soothing, like sun-baked cedar or distant campfires extinguished long ago. A tiny lizard darts across one of the sunlit patches on the floor, pausing to warm itself before disappearing behind a stone ledge. Even its presence feels harmonious, as though this room welcomes every quiet creature that finds its way in. You sink gently onto one of the low platforms, letting your hands rest in your lap as you take in the stillness. The patterns in the sand seem endless, beginning and ending in smooth, unhurried loops. You watch the attendant's rake glide across the floor, reshaping the desert into new swirls of meaning. The room feels alive, but softly so alive the way a dream is, or a memory softened by time. When you finally rise, your steps leave faint impressions in the sand, temporary marks that will soon be smoothed away, just like the footprints of countless palace visitors before you. You look toward the next doorway, where warm light glows like a welcoming lantern. With a final inhale of the room's sunlit calm, you step forward, ready to enter whatever gentle space awaits beyond. The wooden planks groaned softly as the wind pressed against the old building, making every shadow shift like it was breathing. For a moment, the dim lantern hanging from the ceiling flickered just once, then steadied, casting long lines of gold across the room. You stepped closer to the center of the floor, not because it felt safe, but because that was where the strange sound was coming from. It wasn't knocking, it wasn't scratching. It was murmur-like, the low hum of voices too quiet to understand, rising and falling as if held in the palms of the earth. You knelt, placing your hand on the cold wood. The vibration pulsed again, almost like someone or something was whispering from the space just below, using the hollow ground as their voice. Then the lantern flickered again, twice this time. You heard footsteps, but they were not on the floor. They were under it. The murmur went silent, and then a single tap sounded beneath your hand, slow, deliberate, as if answering a question you didn't remember asking. You pulled back quickly, heart pounding. Whatever lived under those floorboards knew you were here, and now it wanted you to know it was here too. If you want section 21, just say next section, you said. Next section, ChatGPT said. Section 21, the handprint in the dust. The tapping stopped as suddenly as it began, leaving the entire room wrapped in a silence so complete it felt heavy like a blanket pressed over your ears. You slowly rose to your feet. The lantern swayed on its hook, not from wind this time, but from something else, something subtle, like the whole building had exhaled. A faint trail of dust drifted down from between the floorboards. You frowned. There hadn't been any dust falling before. You stepped backhand. That's when you noticed it. Right behind you on the wooden planks, a handprint, not sharp, not grotesque, just a soft, dusty outline, small enough to be unsettling, large enough to belong to something that was definitely not a child. You hadn't heard footsteps above you. No one else was in the room, and yet the print was fresh. So fresh, you could still see tiny motes rising from it, as if whatever made it had lifted its hand only a heartbeat ago. Your breath caught. The floorboards beneath your feet gave a single, hollow creak, not from your weight, but from something pressing upward, something following the sound of your movements. You stepped away carefully, keeping your eyes on the handprint, watching the edges crumble slightly as the lantern flickered again. Somewhere below, a whisper curled up through the cracks, too soft to understand, but not too soft to feel. It brushed along your spine like a cold breath. The whisper didn't fade this time. It grew. Not loud, never loud, just clearer, more intentional, like something down in the dark had realized you could hear it, and was adjusting itself so you could hear it better. You crouched slowly, the lantern trembling in your hand, and watched the floorboards. At first, nothing happened. Then a tiny movement. One of the boards, exactly beside the dusty handprint, lifted by a single millimeter. Not pried up, not broken, just pushed. From underneath, a breath escaped you before you could stop it. The board settled again, then lifted a little higher. This time, the nails groaned. A thin line of darkness appeared between the wood and whatever lay beneath. Cold air drifted out, carrying with it a smell that wasn't rot or damp or decay, but something worse. A smell like a room that hasn't been opened in years, but where someone has been breathing the whole time. You stepped back, but the floor followed you. A second board rose, then a third, each one just a little, like fingers testing for weak spots, pushing, searching. The whisper rose again. Not words, not yet, just a tone, a low, almost rhythmic pulse, like something was knocking from below, but trying to disguise itself as speech. Then everything stopped, dead still. The boards flattened, the whisper choked out. Silence swallowed the room whole, and from directly beneath your feet you felt a slow, deliberate tap. Once, twice, then nothing. The whisper didn't fade this time. It grew. Not loud, never loud, just clearer, more intentional, like something down in the dark had realized you could hear it, and was adjusting itself so you could hear it better. You crouched slowly, the lantern trembling in your hand, and watched the floorboards. At first nothing happened. Then a tiny movement. One of the boards, exactly beside the dusty handprint, lifted by a single millimeter, not pried up, not broken, just pushed. From underneath, a breath escaped you before you could stop it. The board settled again, then lifted a little higher. This time, the nails groaned. A thin line of darkness appeared between the wood and whatever lay beneath. Cold air drifted out, carrying with it a smell that wasn't rot or damp or decay, but something worse. A smell like a room that hasn't been opened in years, but where someone has been breathing the whole time. You stepped back, but the floor followed you. A second board rose, then a third, each one just a little, like fingers testing for weak spots, pushing, searching. The whisper rose again. Not words, not yet, just a tone, a low, almost rhythmic pulse, like something was knocking from below, but trying to disguise itself as speech. Then everything stopped, dead still. The boards flattened. The whisper choked out. Silence swallowed the room whole, and from directly beneath your feet, you felt a slow, deliberate tap. Once, twice, then nothing. You stood frozen, the echo of that last tap still humming faintly through the soles of your feet, an echo your mind kept replaying even after the room returned to stillness. The lantern's glow trembled across the faded walls, making the shadows flutter like strips of black cloth stirred by an unseen breeze. Nothing moved now, no rising boards, no whisper, only the hush of an old house pretending it had never stirred at all. You took a slow breath, letting the light steady in your hand, and turned toward the staircase, ready to leave the room, the boards, the cold breath from below. But then, you noticed something that hadn't been there before. A line, a faint vertical seam on the far wall, thin as a thread, just visible where the lantern brushed across it. He stepped closer. The seam traced downward from the ceiling, disappearing behind a layer of paint that was too clean, too smooth compared to the rest of the wall. You exhaled carefully. This wasn't damage, or age, or settling wood. It was a door, a narrow door, disguised within the wall so seamless you never would have seen it without the angle of light or the shifting shadows. You raised the lantern higher. The paint covering the hidden edges was cracked only in the smallest places, like something behind the door had pushed outward just enough to stress the surface. Not recently, not strongly, just persistently. He reached out, fingertips brushing the outline. The surface was colder than the air of the room itself, as if the space behind it held a different temperature entirely. Then beneath your touch, the faintest vibration, not movement, not knocking, breathing, a slow, almost inaudible inhale, followed by an even slower exhale, as though the wall had a heartbeat hidden somewhere deep within it. You stepped back again, lantern pressed against your chest, trying to listen past your own quickening pulse. The breathing stopped. The wall fell motionless. But now that you had seen the door, you couldn't unsee it, and something told you it was waiting for you to notice something more, something subtle, something just out of sight. The air thickened softly, almost like the house was holding its breath with you. Then a whisper note from the floorboards this time slid faintly from behind the hidden door. One single, gentle sound, like fingertips brushing the inside of a hollow wall. The sound came so softly that at first you weren't sure you heard it at all, just the faintest, barest drag of something touching the hidden door from the other side. Not scratching, not clawing, more like the gentle sweep of fingertips along a wooden surface, feeling its grain, testing its thickness. Your breath caught, but the lantern glowed calm and steady in your hands, its warm light softening the edges of the room. The house no longer felt angry or threatening, just watchful, as though it had settled into a kind of quiet curiosity. The shadows seemed to lean in close, but not consume you, wrapping the space in a slow, drowsy stillness. You traced the seam again. This time, the wood underneath felt warmer, as though acknowledging your touch. The air around you settled, no movement, no stirring dust, no sudden vibration, only the sense that both you and the unseen space behind the wall were listening to each other. The silence wasn't empty now. It carried a strange, calm tension, like the final moment before a curtain slowly lifts. Your gaze drifted downward, to where the boards in the floor still lay perfectly flat. They offered no hint of rising again. Whatever had stirred beneath them seemed to have shifted its attention upward toward this hidden door, toward you. He lifted the lantern a little higher. Its glow spread across the faint outline, revealing something new you hadn't noticed before. A tiny, almost invisible circle near the center of the door. Not a knob, not a keyhole, just a small, smooth depression in the paint, perfectly shaped for a fingertip. He brushed it lightly. The wall gave a soft, hesitant response, a pulse, not quite movement, not quite sound, as though it were recognizing the touch, waiting, inviting, but not demanding. The entire house felt so quiet that even your heartbeat felt loud, each steady thump echoing gently through your ribs. The air smelled faintly of dust and old linen, but underneath that, something else, a hint of cool stone, the kind found deep underground, a place untouched by sun or wind. Slowly, the seam of the door widened by the width of a single hair. You didn't see it move, but you felt the shift in the air. A breath of coolness slipped out, brushing your skin like the exhale of a long-forgotten room, finally allowed to breathe again. Something on the other side was waiting, not rushing, not threatening, merely waiting, and the house around you seemed to murmur its approval in the stillness, as if encouraging you to decide whether to press deeper or to turn away. The depression in the door still warmed beneath your fingertip, patient, steady, calm, one touch, one intention. That was all it seemed to need. The tiny depression beneath your fingertip held its warmth, steady and gentle, as though the hidden door itself were breathing quietly along with you. The lantern's glow flickered softly, not in warning but in a kind of rhythmic sway, casting long, restful shadows that moved like drifting curtains in a breeze you couldn't feel. You pressed, not forcefully, just enough to let the door know you were willing. A soft click sounded, so faint it might have been only a shift in the house's old bones. The seam widened up by much, only a sliver but enough for a thin blade of cool, pale darkness to appear between the edges. The door didn't swing open, it didn't creak. It simply eased itself forward by the smallest imaginable amount, as if trying not to startle you. You stepped closer, lantern lifted slightly. The light spilled into the narrow opening, touching something smooth stone, perhaps curving downward into deeper shadow. A passageway, hidden not just behind a wall, but beneath the house's very memory. The air drifting out from the gap was cool and calm, with a faint scent of minerals and stillness, like the quiet breath of a cellar that hasn't been disturbed in centuries. There was no threat in it, just a patient, ancient quiet that welcomed neither haste nor fear. You rested your palm against the edge of the door. It felt grateful, not alive, exactly, but attentive, as though some presence beyond the wood understood your hesitance and matched it with its own. The room around you softened. The boards at your feet lay peaceful and unmoving. The whisper was gone, not silenced, simply satisfied. For now, your lantern's light revealed a faint suggestion of steps beyond the door, carved into the stone floor, descending in a gentle spiral. Their surfaces were worn smooth by time, not by feet, almost polished by stillness itself. You leaned a little closer, listening. Nothing answered. No breath, no movement. Just the quiet hum of a space that had been waiting a very, very long time for someone to open it again. The seam in the hidden door had stopped widening. It had opened only enough for you to see the path, and now it waited, patient, unhurried, as if promising that it would remain exactly as it was until you were ready to step forward. The lantern warmed your hands. The silence wrapped you like a blanket. Everything in the room seemed to slow, as though time here moved differently. Not forward, not backward, but gently, like a tide that rises only an inch at a time. The stairway below waited, not calling you, not pulling, just existing, quietly, as though it had all the time in the world. And now, so did you. You stood at the threshold, lantern held close, breathing in the cool air drifting up from the hidden space. It wasn't stale, as one might expect from a sealed chamber. Instead, it carried a faint clarity like stone that had been kept untouched, preserved in a long, gentle slumber. The stairway waited, softly curved, worn smooth as river rock, not carved by hands in a hurry, but shaped with patience and intention. You took your first step. The stone sent a mild chill through your foot, not sharp or biting, more like the cool surface of a shaded courtyard at dawn. The lantern cast a warm halo around you, its glow brushing over the spiral walls and revealing gentle patterns etched into the stone. Not hieroglyphs, exactly, but lines and shapes that moved with a kind of quiet rhythm, as though they were meant to guide rather than tell. The further you descended, the softer the world above became. The creaks of the old house faded. The memory of the shifting floorboards dimmed, and even your own heartbeat eased into a slower, calmer cadence. Each step lowered you deeper into a space untouched by rush or fear. Here, the silence wasn't empty. It was soft, like wool or distant fog. A silence that settled around you, warm and comforting, asking nothing, offering room to breathe deeply, freely. You ran your fingers lightly along the stone wall. The surface felt smooth and slightly warm, as if it held the residual memory of sunlight from some ancient morning far above. Lines carved into the wall curled beneath your touch like the edges of distant waves. Your lantern illuminated more of the spiraling descent, and you realized the steps were growing wider, opening gradually into something larger below. You couldn't see the bottom yet, but the air thickened with a sense of quiet anticipation. Nothing sharp, nothing urgent, only a gentle awareness that you were nearing a space that had been waiting to be seen. A faint hum drifted upward, not mechanical, not whispered, just a low resonance in the stone itself. A vibration so subtle it almost felt like your imagination, but it matched the calm slowness of your breathing, the steady rhythm of the lantern's flame. You paused on a wider step. The spiral turned ahead, disappearing into soft darkness. The air below carried a note of something earthy-like, clay jars, dried herbs, cool sand. This place was not meant for fear. It was meant for keeping, for preserving, for shelter. You lifted the lantern again, letting its light spill gently down the curve. Somewhere beneath you, slow and deep, the quiet stone seemed to exhale. Everything was ready for you to step further. All you had to do was continue downward. You continued downward, each soft footfall echoing only faintly, as though the stone absorbed sound rather than carried it. The lantern's light drifted ahead of you in a warm, slow ripple, brushing the curve of the stairwell's walls, revealing more of the gentle carvings that seemed to follow your descent like a quiet, rhythmic pattern. Eventually, the spiral began to widen. The steps became broader, their edges rounded from time, their surfaces smoother still until the staircase gradually unfurled into a level floor. You stepped off the final curve and into a broad, circular chamber carved entirely from pale stone. The moment your feet touched the floor, the air settled around you in a subtle sigh. This room wasn't cold, it wasn't warm. It simply felt balanced, a place where temperature, sound, and stillness met in perfect evenness. Your lantern illuminated the space slowly, like dawn blooming across a quiet desert. The chamber's walls were lined with tall, graceful niches, each one holding objects you couldn't yet fully see, shapes wrapped in linen, bundles of reeds, jars sealed with smooth clay stoppers. Nothing threatening, nothing disturbed, merely items kept in deliberate order, like offerings placed for safekeeping long ago. Near the center of the room lay a circular platform made of the same pale stone. Its surface was carved with delicate grooves that spiraled inward, resembling the path of water flowing toward a calm pool. The grooves held dust, but not thickly, only a thin, soft layer, as if the room had been protected from the harshness of time, even as it slept. You walked slowly around the perimeter, lantern held low. The light revealed carvings etched into the walls, rounded shapes of lotus flowers, flowing water, and stars arranged in gentle patterns. These weren't hieroglyphs telling a story. They were symbols of rest, of cycles, of watching and waiting. A peaceful place, a preserved place. Your footsteps created a soft, muted echo that faded kindly, never jarring, never sharp. The chamber seemed to encourage quiet movement, urging you to breathe slower, to let your shoulders loosen, to simply exist within its calm. You paused near one of the niches. Inside sat a jar with a faded red band painted around its middle. The clay stopper had been molded with care, forming a rounded shape that looked almost like a gently sleeping face. You reached out not to open it, just to feel the presence of something created with such patient hands. Your fingers hovered an inch away. A warmth radiated from the jar, not heat, not life, just a soft impression, as if the chamber itself recognized your presence and welcomed your curiosity. The lantern flame fluttered once, then steadied, casting long, serene shadows across the room. And then you noticed something near the far wall, a second doorway, not hidden like the one above, not disguised, simply waiting, a tall, graceful archway carved into the stone, leading into deeper, softer darkness beyond. The air drifting from the archway smelled faintly of cool earth and papyrus, like an old library untouched for countless years, not ominous, not calling you forward, just present. You took a slow step toward it. The chamber around you remained still, watchful, but calm, as though content to let you move at your own pace. Whatever lay beyond the archway seemed to be part of a much larger story, one that the house above, the hidden door, and the quiet descending stair had only begun to reveal. You lifted the lantern higher. The path ahead waited gently. You approached the tall stone archway slowly, lantern lifted just high enough for its warm glow to touch the first few feet of the passage beyond. The light didn't stretch far, it faded gently, swallowed by the soft dark in a way that felt less like being consumed and more like being welcomed into deeper quiet. The air changed as you stepped closer, not colder, not warmer, simply denser, as if the space ahead held more history, more memory, more layers of time resting together undisturbed. The archway itself was smooth, carved with rounded edges that looked almost like fingers had brushed them 1,000 times over centuries. A faint pattern lined the stone waves, stars, and a long thread of lotus petals drifting downward as though floating on a slow current. You reached out and touched the arch with your fingertips. It answered with a subtle vibration, so gentle you might have missed it if you weren't already breathing slowly, your senses softened by the chamber's calm. The vibration wasn't a warning. It felt more like acknowledgement, a quiet nod from the stone, recognizing you as someone who had stepped this far with care. The passage beyond the archway stretched forward in a low, descending corridor, its ceiling arched softly overhead, creating a tunnel of pale stone that cradled sound and softened every echo. Your lantern's light touched the walls, revealing more of the gentle carved motifs, friver reeds swaying, lines that suggested wind or time or breath moving in a slow, unbroken pattern. You stepped through. The moment you crossed under the arch, the air became subtly still, as though you'd entered a pocket of preserved common atmosphere that had held itself perfectly balanced for ages. Your footsteps sounded different here, muffled, cushioned, as if the stone beneath your feet wanted to protect the quiet. The corridor curved slightly, and with each step, the space grew more serene. The flame in your lantern flickered only once, then steadied into a calm, unwavering glow, illuminating just enough for you to see where your feet should go next. As you walked, a faint rustling sound brushed your senses. Not movement, not wind, more like something shifting inside your memory, an ancient familiarity you couldn't quite place, as though you had walked halls like this in a dream long before. Soon, the narrow corridor widened again, gently opening into another chamber, smaller than the previous one, but more focused, more intimate. Your lantern revealed a low stone bench carved into the wall, with soft dust gathered in perfectly untouched layers across its surface. Beside the bench stood a tall, slender jar, sealed, its surface painted with pale blue lines in the shape of water ripples. The room felt like a place meant for pause, for preparing oneself before stepping deeper into whatever waited beyond. Another archway stood at the far end. This one was different. Its edges were lined with tiny carved stars that caught the lantern's glow, reflecting specks of warm light like distant constellations against a night sky. And the air drifting from this deeper passage carried a faint, soothing scent of old papyrus, cool minerals, and something almost like dried lavender once offered in a quiet ritual. You felt yourself breathe slower, not out of caution, but because the space itself invited calm. The deeper path waited, still and patient, as though knowing you would continue when you were ready. The chamber, the stars, the silence, all of it felt like a soft hand resting reassuringly on your shoulder. It was time to go on, but gently, at your own pace. You stood before the second archway, its carved stars glimmering softly under your lantern's steady glow. Each star seemed placed with careful intention, some clustered, some spaced far apart, some aligned in delicate arcs that echoed constellations you half recognized. The stone itself had been shaped so finely that the tiny carvings appeared almost luminous, as though light was gently rising from within them, rather than reflecting from your lantern. A calmness settled around you, not a hush of fear, but the quiet you feel when stepping into a library late at night, where every book sleeps softly behind its cover, waiting to be opened with care. You lifted the lantern and stepped toward the archway. The moment you crossed beneath it, the air shifted in a subtle, soothing way. A faint warmth brushed your cheeks, dry warmth, like the breath of desert sand after sunset. The scent of old parchment deepened, mingling with traces of cool stone and faint herbs. It felt ancient, but not decayed, preserved. Ahead, the passage widened into a long hall carved with the same pale stone. The ceiling arched high above, disappearing into gentle shadow. The walls bore carvings arranged in calm, rippling patterns, shapes that suggested water flowing, wind drifting, or time itself moving slowly across the centuries. Your lantern cast a warm, expanding glow that revealed small shelves carved directly into the stone. Each shelf held objects wrapped in linen or secured in clay jars, their surfaces decorated with quiet, faded symbols. Nothing disturbed them. Nothing felt out of place. Every detail seemed arranged with deliberate care, as though the hall itself were a place of safekeeping and still memory. As you walked, your footsteps echoed softly, ever sharp, always gentle, absorbed by the hall's serene acoustics. The floor sloped downward slightly, guiding you with its graceful incline. Now and then you paused, your hand drifting toward a carved pattern or a seal pressed into an old jar. You didn't open anything. You didn't need to. Simply being in the presence of these ancient objects felt like listening to a story spoken in a language older than speech, one carried through texture, temperature, and silence. The hall's quiet deepened as you moved forward. You noticed that the carved patterns along the walls began to shift. The flowing lines became more intricate. The stars grew more numerous. The motifs of water and wind intertwined with constellations and lotus petals, creating a sense of movement that seemed almost slow and living. Your lantern's flame didn't waver. It glowed confidently, warming your hands, guiding you onward. And then, at the far end of the hall, another chamber appeared, its entrance framed by wide pillars carved with spiraling patterns that resembled drifting sand. The doorway was open, welcoming, with no barrier or hidden seam. From within came a soft, golden glow, not lantern light, not torchlight, but something gentler, as if the walls themselves held a memory of sunlight and were releasing it slowly. A deep stillness washed over you. You were nearing something important, not frightening, not dangerous, just ancient and waiting. The chamber beyond breathed with quiet warmth, like a room that had been patiently sleeping for centuries, ready now to reveal itself gently, without hurry. You took one more slow step toward the glowing doorway. The air thickened with peaceful expectation. Whatever awaited inside, it had been expecting you. You approached the wide-pillared doorway, lanthorn held steady in your hand, though you soon realized it was hardly needed. The gentle golden glow spilling from the chamber beyond was warm and pervasive, bright enough to guide you but not harsh. It was the kind of light that reminded you of late afternoon drifting through sheer curtains, softened by time and memory. As you stepped through the threshold, the glow wrapped around you like a warm blanket. The chamber was circular, carved with a precision so smooth it felt almost organic, as though the stone had grown into this shape rather than been cut. The ceiling arched high above, where a faint shimmer glowed like a sunrise hidden within the rock. The light wasn't coming from a flame or a lamp. It simply existed, breathed out by the stone itself. Your lantern, sensing the brightness, dimmed slightly, its flame settling into a quiet, companionable glow. Around the perimeter of the chamber were tall, narrow alcoves, each housing something wrapped in careful layers of linen or placed within sealed jars, as if kept in a place of honor or remembrance. Unlike the previous rooms, nothing here was coated in dust. The items seemed almost freshly placed, as if someone had tended to them not too long ago, preserving their arrangement with gentle precision. In the center of the room lay a large, shallow stone basin, empty, silent, patient. The grooves carved into the basin's inner walls formed spiraling patterns that led inward toward its heart, where a single smooth stone rested, a sphere of pale quartz, glowing with the same soft light that filled the room. You approached slowly, drawn not by urgency, but by the calm radiance that the sphere emitted. Every step felt cushioned, the air thick with serenity. A faint humbly more than the memory of a sound seemed to vibrate through the chamber, like a distant lullaby held gently in the stone. You knelt beside the basin. The quartz sphere pulsed once, very softly, a shift so subtle it could have been nothing more than the lantern's reflection. But the warmth brushing your fingertips told you it was real. The sphere wasn't a live knot in the way you might think, but it carried something. A presence, a memory, a watching quietness. You extended a hand toward it. The moment your fingers brushed its surface, a warmth spread through your palm, steady, soothing, like sun-warmed river stones held after nightfall. The chamber reacted with a slow exhale. The wall's soft glow brightened slightly, not blinding, but deepening into a richer gold. The patterns carved into the stone seemed to shimmer. Even the air itself felt as though it thickened with a jolt, calm. Not a warning, never a warning, just an acknowledgement of your touch, your presence, your willingness to listen. You lifted the quartz sphere gently. It was lighter than expected, smooth as polished glass, warm like a heartbeat beneath your palms. As you held it, the faint hum in the air deepened into something more rhythmic, almost musical. Though the sound was so subtle it might have been imagined. The chamber did not change further. It simply waited, quiet, peaceful, open. There was no sense of danger, only the awareness that the sphere, the basin, and the entire room had a purpose. Something patient, something old, something meant to be revealed slowly, like dawn spreading across sand. And as you stood in the glow, holding the warm sphere, you knew the deeper chambers below were waiting to show you more. Not frightening truths, not dark secrets, but the kind of understanding one finds only when stepping gently into forgotten places. Behind you, the entrance remained open, the hall still and watchful. Ahead, somewhere beyond this golden chamber, something else waited, something deeper, something quietly extraordinary. You held the quartz sphere gently in both hands, its warmth seeping slowly into your palms. spreading upward through your wrists like the soft touch of sunlight after a long night. The chamber around you seemed to breathe with you walls glowing, air shivering with a quiet expectancy, as though the very stone recognized the moment you lifted the sphere from its resting place. You lowered yourself to sit beside the basin, the stone floor smooth and comfortably cool beneath you. For a while, you didn't move at all. There was no need to. The sphere pulsed faintly, like a steady, calm heartbeat, the rhythm syncing with your own until your breathing slowed, deepened, softened. The basin's spiraling grooves caught your eye once again. They weren't just decorative. They felt like pathways, gentle channels carved to guide something inward, toward the center where the sphere had rested. The spirals reminded you of slow-flowing water, or the way wind shapes dunes along the edge of a desert. Your fingertips brushed the grooves. A faint warmth answered, not hot, not sudden, just a gradual rising, like embers waking beneath ash. Then, very quietly, the sphere hummed. It wasn't a sound in the air. It was a feeling in your hands, a vibration soft as silk, as if the sphere held a memory and was choosing, in its patient way, to share a small part of it with you. The golden glow of the chamber deepened, shadows thinning until they looked like watercolor pools against the curved walls. You closed your eyes, letting the warmth guide you, breathing slowly as the hum settled into a soothing rhythm. Then images not sharp, not literal, but soft impressions drifted into your mind like sand carried gently on wind. A quiet dawn spreading across wide, empty dunes. A figure kneeling beside this very basin, hands steady, expression calm. Shelves filled with jars and linen bundles, placed with ritual care, and the stone itself alive not with movement, but with remembering. A place of keeping, a place of rest, a place where the past breathed slowly, gently, waiting for respectful hands to uncover it. The impressions faded as softly as they had appeared, dissolving into the warm quiet that filled the chamber. The sphere dimmed back to its gentle glow, no longer pulsing, simply resting in your palms like a warm pebble at the edge of a river. You exhaled. Nothing frightening had come, nothing overwhelming, just a glimpse, a soft whisper of how this space had once been used, long before the house above it ever existed. You placed a hand along the rim of the basin, feeling the smooth stone beneath your fingertips. The grooves held their warmth, as though the chamber understood something had been shared, and now waited for what you would do next. The archway behind you remained open, awash in gentle golden light. But now you noticed something you hadn't seen before. Beyond the golden glow at the far side of the chamber, almost invisible, tucked between the curves of the wall, you saw another doorway, low, narrow, unlit, not ominous, just quieter than the rest. Subtle, patient, as though meant to be found only after this moment of stillness. You rose slowly, sphere still warm in your hands. The chamber hummed its gentle approval, and the soft glow pulsed once welcoming, steady, unhurried. A deeper path awaited, not darker, just quieter, and you felt ready to step toward it. The blizzard finally thinned into a gray, whispering haze as the group pushed deeper into the abandoned railway tunnel. What had first looked like simple frost on the walls now revealed itself as tiny glass-like scales, arranged in swirling patterns, almost like the marks left behind by something brushing past, coiling in and out of the stone. Marla lifted her lantern closer. The patterns responded, not like a creature waking, nothing alive stirred, but the frost lines glowed, faintly, as if reacting to the lantern's heat. A soft spiral of light unfurled across the wall, drifting along the curve of the tunnel until it met an old, half-collapsed signal tower ahead. "Is it guiding us?" Benny whispered. "No," Marla said quietly. "It's remembering us." The group exchanged confused looks. Before anyone could ask, a low vibration rolled through the tunnel like distant machinery powering on after decades of sleep. Snow dust shook loose from the ceiling. The glow on the walls gathered, funneling into a single point at the base of the signal tower. Then the tower clicked. A panel on the side unlocked with a metallic snap. Inside, instead of gears, wires, or rusted equipment, they found an object wrapped in layers of frostbutt, still unmistakably warm to the touch. A lantern, not like Marla's, not like any lantern from the modern world. Its frame was carved with the same spiraling patterns now lit across the tunnel walls. Its glass pane flickered faintly despite no flame inside. Benny stepped back. Okay, no one touched that. We learned our lesson with weird artifacts back in section 14, but Marla didn't look afraid. She looked relieved. This is it, she breathed. The lantern spiral. The thing those old legends said could rewrite the storm. She reached toward it, and the tunnel lights flared. A silhouette appeared at the far end of the tunnel, human-shaped, still, watching, not moving, not breathing, not blinking. Just standing there, framed by the dim glow of the frostlit spiral. Ah, Benny whispered. Marla, please tell me that's a very patient person lost in the snow. But Marla didn't answer, because the silhouette lifted something, a lantern identical to the one in front of them, and its light flickered once. A signal, not an attack, not a greeting, a summons. Something was about to begin. Something that had been waiting a long, long time. The silhouette at the far end of the tunnel didn't move any closer, yet the lantern it held glowed brighter, pulsing in a steady rhythm. The frost-laced walls answered with their own pulse, the spirals brightening in perfect sync, as if everything in the tunnel shared one heartbeat. Benny swallowed. Marla, you said the lantern spiral could rewrite the storm, not summon creepy tunnel people. Marla didn't take her eyes off the figure. That's not a person, at least. Not anymore. A cold draft swept through the tunnel, even though the air had been still seconds before. It carried with it a faint sound like old footsteps echoing in an empty station. Slow, heavy, remembered. The glowing spirals on the walls shivered. The lantern inside the opened signal tower flickered, as if responding. Talia stepped between Marla and the mysterious figure. Okay, if that thing wants something, it can keep waiting. Let's back out slowly, and she froze mid-sentence. The figure raised its lantern a little higher. Its outline sharpened just enough for them to notice something deeply wrong. Its feet didn't touch the ground. It hovered an inch above the old railway ties, drifting like a projection not fully tethered to the world. Marla whispered, "It's an echo keeper." Benny blinked. A what? Old railway folklore. During blizzards, lantern keepers would walk the tracks to guide stranded trains. Some never came back. Some were said to keep walking long after their bodies were gone, repeating their last unfinished route. The figure pulsed its lantern again once, twice, then a slow third time. Talia frowned. That's a pattern. Marla nodded. A request. Request for what? Benny asked, clearly not wanting the answer. For us, Marla said quietly. It wants us to follow. The spirals along the walls glowed brighter, forming a faint pathway leading deeper into the tunnel toward the Echo Keeper. The storm outside moaned through the tunnel's mouth, like it knew exactly what was happening. Talia tightened her scarf, eyes narrow. We either follow it, or we go back into the blizzard and hope not to freeze. Benny groaned. Okay, fine. Creepy ghost lantern thing it is. But if this turns into a walk toward the light situation, I'm turning around. The Echo Keeper drifted backward, lantern steady, waiting for them to commit. Marla picked up the warm spiral-etched lantern from the signal tower. The moment she touched it, The frost on the walls shimmered in a wave like a breath drawn in. Then everything went silent, expectant. She looked back at the group. It's time, and together they stepped toward the keeper. The Echo Keeper drifted ahead, always the same distance from them, never closer, never farther, like it existed on a track of its own. Its lantern glowed with a low, steady pulse, and each time the light expanded, the frost spirals along the tunnel walls brightened in reply, guiding the group forward with a soft, wavering shimmer. The tunnel itself had changed. The air felt thicker, as though every breath had to pass through layers of memory before reaching their lungs. And the sound, if it could be called a sound, wasn't echo exactly. It was more like the faint hum of a place that had waited too long to be noticed. Talia walked first beside Marla, her voice low. "Feels like the tunnel's alive." "It isn't alive," Marla murmured. "Just awake." Behind them, Benny kept his flashlight pointed at the floor. Awake is not better. Awake means aware, and aware means it knows we're here. And why did the track just change color? The rails beneath them had indeed shifted. What had been rusted metal now gleamed faintly beneath the frost, as though polished by invisible hands. Thin blue light traced the cracks between the ties, flowing further into the dark like a river of stars. Marla crouched, touching one of the glowing lines. "It's showing us where the keeper walked, over and over. He left a path behind, and the spiral is letting us see it." As she rose, the lantern in her hand flickered, and for a brief instant, the air warmed. Not much, but enough that the frost on the nearby rock receded in soft droplets. Talia exhaled. "That's new. The lantern responds to intention," Marla said. "If we focus on staying safe, it protects. If we focus on finding the source of the storm, it'll point the way." Benny blinked. "What if someone focuses on, I don't know, leaving, right now?" Marla gave him a patient look. "It won't force us to stay, but it knows we came down here for a reason." The keeper drifted slowly around a bend in the tunnel, its lantern glow softening until it became just a pale halo on the darkness ahead. When they followed, the tunnel widened into a small cavern, a place that looked untouched by human hands for decades. Icicles hung like glass curtains from the ceiling, catching the keeper's light and scattering it in gentle ripples across the frost-covered floor. At the center of the cavern stood something unexpected, a broken railway switch, old, bent, covered in frost, but glowing faintly with the same spiral pattern Marla had seen earlier. The Echo Keeper hovered beside it, lantern dimming as if tired. Talia whispered, "What is this place?" "A memory," Marla said softly. "Something important happened here, something unfinished." She lifted the warm spiral lantern, and its glow rolled slowly across the cavern walls. The frost spirals reacted immediately, rising like faint tendrils from the surface, forming shape-shadow scenes. A storm raging, a lantern keeper alone, a switch frozen in place, a train light approaching through a blizzard, unable to stop. Marla inhaled sharply. He stayed to force the switch manually, to prevent a collision, but the storm took him before he could finish. Benny's voice dropped. "So he has been stuck here, trying to finish it ever since." The Echo Keeper pulsed once sad, slow, but steady. Talia stepped forward, her breath calm, her tone gentle. "Then maybe we're here to help him finish it." The cavern grew still, completely still, like the very air was waiting to see what they would do next. The cavern seemed to lean in around them, listening like the frost itself understood that a moment long overdue had finally arrived. Marla stepped toward the old railway switch at the center, her breath leaving a pale cloud that drifted upward, slow and soft. The Echo Keeper hovered beside the frozen mechanism, its lantern dim but steady. as though conserving the last of its strength. The light it gave off wavered like a memory trying not to fade. Marla reached out and brushed her fingers along the metal handle. It was cold, colder than the cavern air, colder than the icicles overhead, cold like something holding on too tightly to the past. "The switch is locked," she murmured, "frozen in place, but not just by ice. It feels like the moment itself is still trapped here." Talia stepped beside her. "How do we untrap a moment?" Marla lifted the spiral-etched lantern. "By giving it a new outcome." The lantern warmed in her hand, its light deepening into a slow, golden glow. As the brightness touched the frozen switch, the frost spirals on the cavern floor shifted, flowing gently, like ripples pushed by a soft breeze. Benny shuffled closer, his voice hushed. "So, we just move it." "It isn't that simple," Marla replied. "We have to move it the right way, the way the Keeper intended, the way he couldn't finish." The Echo Keeper pulsed faintly once, twice, then held steady on the third beat. Talia nodded. "A rhythm." Marla breathed in and focused, matching the lantern's warm glow to the Keeper's slow pulse. The cavern responded. Icicles hummed with quiet resonance. The frost spirals along the walls brightened, widening into gentle curves that formed a soft, spiraling pattern encircling the switch. On the third pulse, Marla whispered. The Keeper glowed. Once, twice. The third beat swelled. Marla pushed. The switch resisted, stubborn, immovable like the weight of the storm itself bore down on it. The metal didn't budge even a fraction. She pressed harder, her breath steady and calm despite the strain. The lantern warmed her hand, a deep radiant heat, as if lending strength to her push. Behind her, she felt Talia's hand rest lightly on her back, steady, grounding, not forcing anything, just offering support. Benny stepped closer too, placing his hand lightly on the switch beside Marla's. Okay. If we're helping a ghost finish a job, let's actually help." The glow around the cavern softened into a warm, comforting brightness. Then, a soft click, barely audible, but unmistakable. The switch moved, just a little. The frost spirals drifted upward, shimmering like tiny stars freed from stillness. The icicles overhead chimed with the gentlest crystalline notes, as though something long held had finally exhaled. The Echo Keeper's lantern brightened more than it had the entire time they'd seen it, full, warm, almost alive. Marla breathed out. "We're close. Just one more." But before she could finish, the cavern floor trembled softly, not in danger but in acknowledgement. The Echo Keeper hovered nearer, its shape clearer now, not frightening, but peaceful, gentle, grateful, as if after all this time it believed they could finish what it started. The tremor beneath their feet settled into a deep, comforting stillness, like the cavern was holding its breath, waiting for the final motion that would release the moment frozen in time. Marla tightened her grip on the switch, feeling the warmth from the spiral lantern pulse in her other hand. The Echo Keeper drifted closer, not threatening, not urgent, just present. Its lantern glowed with a gentle rhythm, each pulse slower and steadier than before, like a heartbeat finally easing after a long strain. Talia stepped beside Marla, her voice barely more than a whisper. "On your pace. No rush. The cavern isn't pushing us. It's waiting for us." Benny swallowed, hugging his coat tighter, even though the air was warming. "Man, even the tunnels are polite now. That's somehow more terrifying." But his voice stayed soft, calm, as if even he felt the atmosphere settle into something peaceful. Marla nodded once, grounding herself in the warm glow of the lantern. Okay. The Keeper's rhythm again. 3 pulses. She lifted the lantern higher. The Keeper responded immediately, its own lantern brightening, syncing with hers. A slow pulse, then another, and finally, the third, rising like a swell of gentle warmth. Marla, Talia, and Benny pushed together. The switch resisted a Gnold, weary, as though burdened by decades of stillness. But this time, the frost spirals didn't cling to it. Instead, they unfurled like tiny curling ribbons, drifting upward and dissolving into soft light. Another click, louder, full. The switch slid into place, not forced, not broken free, just finished. A wave of warmth spread outward from the mechanism, sweeping across the cavern floor. Frost melted into thin mist that drifted lazily upward like morning fog. The icicles overhead shimmered, releasing soft droplets that fell with delicate plinks onto the rocks below. The Echo Keeper's lantern glowed with a final, brilliant radiance. For the first time, the Keeper's silhouette grew still, not hovering forward, not drifting back, simply standing, as if the weight of its last task had finally eased from its shoulders. Marla felt her breath catch. He's free. The Keeper lifted its lantern in a simple gesture, one that felt like gratitude rather than request. A soft glow washed over the group, warm and gentle, settling around them like a blanket. Then the light from the Keeper's lantern began to soften, dimming into an almost golden haze, not fading away entirely, just returning to where it belonged. Its form dissolved gradually, the way frost melts under morning sun's glow, peaceful, unhurried. The cavern brightened with a soft, natural glow that had nothing to do with the Keeper anymore. Benny exhaled shakily. Okay, that was actually kind of beautiful. Talia smiled faintly, brushing melting frost from her jacket. Feels like the tunnel finally let go. Marla lowered the spiral lantern, its warmth quiet now, but steady. There's still more ahead. The storm wasn't created only by this moment, but this was part of it. Something anchored here, something hurting. She turned toward the far end of the cavern, where a new pathway had appeared, its entrance framed by spirals of soft, shimmering frost that hadn't existed before. Talia tightened her gloves, her expression gentle. Then let's keep walking. Benny sighed. Yep, if another ghost shows up, I'm charging rent. The three of them stepped toward the new passage, the spiral lantern lighting their way with a calm, steady glow. Behind them, the cavern settled into silence, a silence not of fear or cold, but of release. The new passage opened before them like a gentle invitation, narrow at first, then gradually widening as the frost spirals along the walls softened into pale, glowing arcs. Unlike the earlier tunnels, this one didn't hum or whisper. It felt quiet, quiet in a peaceful way, like stepping into a library that had been untouched for years. Marla lifted the spiral lantern. Its light no longer pulsed urgently. Instead, it glowed with a steady warmth that touched the walls and made the frosted carvings shimmer like distant constellations. Benny squinted into the dim, silvery haze. Okay, this tunnel is way less creepy, which means it's probably leading us to something extremely creepy. Talia gave a small laugh under her breath. Or maybe it's giving us a break. Even storms have calm parts. The air here was different, softer, more open, like the tunnel had been carved by time itself instead of tools. The floor sloped gently downward, and each step carried them deeper into a space that felt older than anything they had seen yet. Something about the air made them slow their pace naturally, as though rushing would break whatever quiet magic held this corridor together. Marla spoke softly, letting her voice blend with the stillness. The spirals aren't warning us anymore. They're guiding. This place feels like a memory that never finished forming. Talia traced a faint spiral on the wall with her gloves. Maybe the storm didn't start with one moment. Maybe it started with a whole web of them. Benny nodded thoughtfully. Yeah, like a bunch of old stories got tangled up together. and now we're walking through the knot. As they moved deeper, tiny flakes drifted from the ceiling, not snow exactly, but something weightless and luminous, like frost turned into slow-falling dust. The flakes didn't melt when they touched the ground. They shimmered for a moment, then vanished in a soft glimmer of light. The tunnel widened gradually until it opened into a long chamber that felt like the inside of a frozen cathedral. Tall columns of ice rose from the floor, catching the lantern's glow and bending it into gentle, swirling beams. The ceiling arched overhead with layers of frost that made it look like a sky carved in glass. Benny let out a breath. Whoa, the chamber wasn't empty. In the very center, illuminated by the soft reflections of ice and lantern light, stood an old wooden marker half buried in frost. It resembled a railway milepost, but its carved numbers had been worn away, leaving only a faint spiral etched at its top. Talia knelt beside it, brushing frost gently away. There's something written here. Marla approached, lantern held low. As the warm glow washed over the marker, faint lines emerged, dulled and fragile, but legible enough. Where the memory breaks, the storm begins. Benny frowned. That sounds like a warning. Marla shook her head slowly. No, it sounds like a direction. Something ahead is fractured, and the storm outside, the one swallowing the townlets, feeding on it. Talia rose, her breath soft. Then this chamber is telling us where to go next. At the far end of the frozen hall, another passage waited, much darker than the one they had come from, with frost spirals that curled inward instead of outward. The lantern in Marla's hand brightened just slightly, as if confirming the path. She exhaled calmly. All right, let's see where the broken memory leads. And together, they stepped once more into the unknown, deeper into the heart of the frostlit world beneath the storm. The passage beyond the frozen hall narrowed into a quiet, winding corridor, its walls curving inward like two palms gently coming together. The frost spirals here were different, no longer smooth and balanced, but slightly uneven, as though shaped by a hand that trembled while carving them. The air felt heavier too, not with danger, but with a kind of old sadness, the kind that settles into forgotten corners and waits for someone to notice. Marla adjusted her hold on the spiral lantern. Its glow softened, turning warmer, like it understood the space needed gentler light. Benny walked behind her, speaking in a low whisper. This feels personal, like we're inside someone's old thought. Talia nodded slowly, her footsteps soft. Maybe we are. If this storm comes from broken memories, maybe this tunnel is where one of them cracked. As they moved forward, the walls began to shift, not physically, but in texture. The frost here didn't lie smooth and still. Instead, it swirled in patterns that flickered faintly when the lantern passed, like quick glimpses of scenes barely formed. A lantern swaying in a distant snowfall, a train whistle echoing through a storm, a figure running along a rail line, breath heavy, determination bright in their eyes. Then the image dissolving into frost again. Marla paused, her breath steady. They're not full memories, just fragments. The corridor opened into a smaller chamber, circular and calm, like the quiet center of a turning wheel. In the middle stood an old bench, simple wood, frost-tasted, shaped like the kind you'd find on a rural train platform. It was out of place underground, but it felt important. Talia approached it carefully. This doesn't belong in a tunnel. No, Marla said softly. It belongs in someone's past. She lifted the lantern, letting its glow fall over the bench. A faint shimmer rose from the frost, a wavering ripple in the air, like heat mirage. Then the chamber changed around them, not fully, just enough that they could feel another place overlapping with this one. A cold evening long ago. snow drifting quietly onto a wooden platform, a train's dim headlight approaching through the dark, someone waiting, someone who never arrived. The shimmer softened, fading like a sigh. Benny rubbed his hands together slowly. That felt lonely. Marla sat gently on the frosted bench. It didn't feel cold beneath it, felt restful, like a seat meant for someone who'd been waiting too long. The storm, it isn't just about fear or danger, she said. It's carrying someone's grief, something unfinished, just like the Echo Keeper's task, but older, much older. Talia lowered herself beside Marla, careful, respectful. If these memories broke, she said softly, maybe they broke around a moment like this. Someone waiting, someone missing, something that was supposed to happen, but didn't. The chamber dimmed again, the frost spirals tightening, curling inward as if pointing toward the chamber's far wall. A faint doorway-shaped outline shimmered there, barely visible beneath the frost. As Marla lifted the lantern toward it, the spirals parted gently, revealing the next path. A deeper one, darker, but not frightening, just filled with something unfinished. Marla stood, breathing steadily. This is where the memory fractured, and this is where we need to go. Benny sighed softly, not afraid, just thoughtful. Feels like we're walking through someone's heartbreak. Talia touched the icy wall lightly as they passed through the newly revealed doorway. Then we walked gently. The lantern glowed warmer than ever as they stepped into the next corridor, and the frost spirals followed them like quiet, comforting stars. The new corridor felt different the moment they stepped into it, closer, quieter, as though sound itself didn't dare echo here. The frost spirals along the walls were faint, almost shy, fading in and out with the softness of a breath. It felt less like a tunnel and more like a memory that wasn't sure it wanted to be remembered. Marla kept the spiral lantern raised, letting its warm glow drift ahead of them in gentle waves. The air responded, trembling softly, as if recognizing a familiar light. Benny walked slowly, careful not to disturb the hush around them. Okay, this place feels like we just opened someone's diary without asking. Talia nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. Then we move with respect. Whatever's waiting here, it matters. As they moved forward, the frost began to change. It thickened into gentle drifts along the floor, like soft snow, fresh, unstepped, perfectly preserved. Their boots made no sound on it, no crunch, no echo, just quiet. Marla stopped when she noticed the wall on her right wasn't solid frost anymore. A thin layer of crystalline ice had formed over something darker beneath an old wooden surface. A door, a normal door, plain, weathered, the kind you'd find in a rural train station long forgotten. She brushed her gloved fingers across it, and the frost peeled away in a small, delicate wave. Behind the ice, faint letters emerged, faded but readable. Waiting room passengers. Only Benny blinked. Why would a waiting room door be underground? It's not underground, Marla said softly. Not really. It's here because someone's memory put it here. She lifted the lantern. Warmth washed across the wooden door, and it responded not by opening, but by revealing. Frost curled away from the edges, melting into tiny breaths of mist that drifted upward and swirled gently above their heads. Then the room beyond bloomed softly into view, not through the door, but around them, as if they had stepped directly into the memory it held. They found themselves standing inside a small, empty station waiting room. Wooden benches lined the walls. Frosted windows revealed nothing but soft, swirling snow beyond. Everything looked real, yet not fully solid, like the memory wasn't strong enough to hold itself together. In the center of the room stood a travel case, old-fashioned, leather-worn smooth, frost clinging to its corners. Talia approached it, kneeling beside the case with gentle hands. Someone left in a hurry. Marla shook her head. No, someone never arrived to pick it up. As the words settled, the room shifted quietly, almost shyly. A silhouette appeared near one of the windows, not detailed, not frightening, just a faint impression of a person sitting on a bench, shoulders slumped slightly, hands folded patiently in their lap, waiting, and waiting, and waiting. Marla stepped closer, her lantern's glow softening, as if out of respect. The silhouette didn't move, didn't turn, didn't look up, but the room itself pulsed gently like a heartbeat of old grief, echoing through decades of unspoken longing. Talia's voice trembled with softness. This storm, it started here, from this place, from this moment. Benny swallowed, a memory stuck on repeat. Marla nodded. A broken promise frozen into time. Someone who waited for someone who never came. And the sorrow of that moment, it spiraled outward. Her lantern brightened, illuminating the silhouette with warm, golden light. The figure flickered, not resisting, just uncertain, as though no one had ever shone light on this moment before. Marla whispered, "We're not here to erase this. We're here to understand it, so the storm doesn't have to hold it anymore." The room dimmed again, but this time the dimness felt like release, a gentle loosening of a knot tied too tightly for too long. The silhouette faded, the frost spirals brightened, and the lantern warmed in Marla's hand, guiding them toward a final doorway that appeared at the far wall. A doorway made of light, spiraling softly with frost and warmth. Talia inhaled deeply. This must be the end, the heart of it. Marla nodded, lifting the lantern. Together, they stepped toward the last threshold, toward the place where the storm's true beginning waited. The wind shifted as the citadel finally appeared through the thinning fog, its towers rising like dark teeth above the ridge. Even from a distance, the place felt heavily awake, as if every stone in its walls was listening for intruders. Ryland slowed his steps, not out of fear. He'd long learned to steady his nerves, but because something felt wrong. Too quiet, too still. Even the guards along the ramparts barely moved, stiff silhouettes against the torchlight. Lyra stopped beside him, eyes narrowing. "They're waiting," she murmured. "But for who? Us? Or something else?" He didn't answer. The pull in his chest, the same instinct that had saved him a dozen times, tightened again. He scanned the cliff paths, the forest edge, the narrow bridge leading to the citadel gate. Nothing moved, but the silence did. It stretched, heavy and unnatural, cloaking the entire valley like a warning. Arlo crouched low, adjusting the straps of his satchel. "If we're walking into a trap, better to know before the door slams behind us." Ryland took a slow breath, grounding himself. "We don't turn back," he said quietly. "Not now. They want us to hesitate." Lyra's grip tightened on the map she carried. "Then let's not give them what they want." Together, the three stepped forward, one careful pace at a time, toward the narrow stone bridge that would carry them across the ravine. Below, the drop was so deep the bottom vanished into darkness. Halfway across, a horn sounded low and distant. Lyra's eyes widened. That wasn't the citadel. Ryland felt it too. The horn came from the woods behind them, echoing off the cliffs. And then, just barely, a reply from even farther away. Arlo straightened. "We're not the only ones coming tonight." Ryland didn't look back. Then we moved faster. The citadel gate loomed ahead, torchlight flickering across its iron beams. The silence broke not with an attack, but with a deep, grinding groan as the gate slowly began to open on its own. Lyra whispered, almost to herself, "Doors don't open unless someone wants them to." Ryland stepped forward anyway, because whatever waited inside was better faced than ignored. And now, With our long walk through ancient sands finally complete, we come to the quiet edge of the tale. The footsteps, the echoes, the mysteries, they all settle now like dust in a warm desert breeze. You've traveled far, much farther than most would ever dare. You've wandered through temples, markets, riverbanks, and forgotten chambers carved thousands of years before your time. And through it all, you listened, imagined, and stayed until the final calm moment. Now, let the story fade gently from your thoughts. Let the warmth of ancient Egypt soften into a peaceful glow behind your eyes, the way lantern light dwindles at the end of a long night. Before you drift off or begin the rest of your day, I want to say thank you truly for spending this journey here. If you enjoyed this story, it really helps to like, subscribe, and leave a comment about your favorite moment. And if you're watching from the US, Europe, Canada, or anywhere else in the world, I hope the time you're listening brings you comfort, whether it's late at night or early in the morning. Now breathe softly, let your shoulders loosen, and let your mind tuck itself into stillness. May the sands settle quietly around you. May the night carry you gently toward rest. Good night, and thank you for listening.